Chapter 733, Perfected. Chapter 733, Perfected. Indeed, Su Zimo was in the fourth group. However, unlike other cultivators in the fourth group, Su Zimo's aura was stable and he looked calm, as though he was not under any pressure. The reason why Su Zimo was relegated to the fourth group was because each time he climbed a stone step, he would linger for a long time in deep thoughts. He would only move on to the next stone step after a while. What is he doing? Lin Xuanji rubbed his chin, puzzled. He was not the only one. Even the nascent souls on the clouds could not read Su Zimo's movements. Nobody knew that while Su Zimo was contending against the pressure of the myriad phenomenon peak, he was comprehending it as well. The myriad phenomenon peak had existed for countless years. Almost all the powerful golden core phenomenons in history had left their marks and auras here. That included phenomenons from the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects. Su Zimo was not at the impossible level such that he could comprehend the essence of those phenomenons just relying on that. However, by experiencing the marks and auras left behind by the golden core phenomenons, he deepened his understanding on the Taoists of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects. A golden core phenomenon was the epitome of all spirit arts. It contained a cultivator's understanding from the Qi condensation to golden core realm. A phenomenon was only born by combining them and evolving from that point. By comprehending those golden core phenomenons, Su Zimo's golden core also grew fuller, and the three different auras of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects that shrouded his golden core grew brighter. The golden core swiveled slowly, fusing fire and water, yin and yang, and turned flawless and pure. It was as though it was harmonizing with heaven and earth and the sun and moon through all eternity. That was a true golden core. That was the true perfected state. It was an irreplaceable and precious experience. Since Su Zimo wanted to establish a Tao, this was an opportunity he could not miss. How difficult was it to establish a Tao? Up till this point, Su Zimo had no clue on how he should start. Perhaps the only way for him to identify an alternate path of cultivation available for mortals was by comprehending the obscurities of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects while experiencing the mysteriousness of the demon Tao. Each time he ascended a stone step, the aura of a different golden core phenomenon would surge towards him. Su Zimo closed his eyes and experienced everything carefully. The other cultivators ascended the myriad phenomenon peak for the sake of fame. However, at that moment, Su Zimo was already beyond the point of fame when he stood on the myriad phenomenon peak. In his eyes, there was only all the living beings in the world. In his chest, there was only the boundless heaven and earth. In his heart, there was a greater ambition. Most of the cultivators in the fourth group could only give up one after another when they saw that it was hopeless. Su Zimo was the only one that continued in silence. The cultivators in the third group could not endure it any longer and released their golden core phenomenons one after another. Gradually, an outcome was determined among the 100-odd people of the third group. Qian released the legacy phenomenon of ethereal peak and stopped at the 25th stone step. He was drenched in sweat and completely exhausted. That was his limit. Some of the cultivators stopped at the 20th stone step, while there were some at the 26th, 27th. There were almost one or two people on every stone step up above. Thankfully, there was no one else at the stone step Qian was on. That way, he could avoid a grueling fight after the elimination battle. Can you make it up another step? Suddenly, a voice sounded beside Qian's ears. He turned over and saw Su Zimo land on the 25th stone step with a single leap, standing beside him. I can't make it anymore. I'm at my limits. Qian wiped away the sweat on his forehead and panted slightly while smiling. Junior brother Su, don't worry about me. Continue advancing. Yes? Su Zimo nodded. Given Qian's spot, he should be ranked around 100 on the phenomenon ranking if nothing went wrong. Although it did not seem high, for Qian, or rather for Ethereal Peak's legacy phenomenon, Ethereal Sword, it was already the best result. There were only 108 spots on the phenomenon ranking. Any cultivator that could obtain a spot was already a true paragon of the era. At that moment, Qian was already at the 99th stone step. This was where he stopped 100 years ago. Now that he had returned, his aura was forceful. He did not stop on the 99th stone step and soared through the air before landing on the 100th stone step. Qian had cast everyone far behind. Although the 8 people in the first group were still traveling side by side, none of them summoned their golden core phenomenons yet. However, the difference between them could gradually be seen as well as they rose higher. Overlord Palace and Diamond Monastery were super sects well known for body tempering. Pangyu and Monk Ju Chun had robust bloodlines, and their breathings were steady. Although they did not summon their golden core phenomenon, they looked comparatively relaxed. The difference in physique was clear between them and Rin Tu of Azura Sect, Monk Jian Kong of Hollow Monastery, Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace, and the others. Some of them had hurried breathings. Some of them had sweat on their foreheads. Once again, everyone was surprised that Ming Zhan was not inferior to Pang Yu and Monk Ju Chun in terms of physique. Ming Zhan's expression was smooth as jade, and he did not sweat at all. His breathing was still steady. It was clear that he was not at his limits. What's the background of that young monk? What cultivation technique did he cultivate? Monk Wei Fu frowned slightly. He must have had some encounters and opportunities. Perfected Lord Bei Do said deeply, "It's still too early to come to a conclusion. Eventually, the rankings between the few of them are determined by their golden core phenomenons and how much power they can release." Even so, all the nascent souls present were clear that even if Ming Zhan's golden core phenomenon was weak, he would make it to the top 20 at least. That was already relatively frightening. Even legacy disciples of the various super sects might not be able to make it to the top 20. For example, the legacy disciple of Clear Heart Nunnery and Shangguan Yu of Cloud Rain Sect were already relegated to the third group. In the second group, some cultivators could not withstand it any longer and released their golden core phenomenons as well. Little Fatty was still holding on. If he had not undergone the baptism with the wisp of Yellow Springs fog within the astral dragon sputum layer, he would have been left behind a long time ago. "Rise!" The paragon of Soaring Feather Sect shouted softly. The sound of water rushing rapidly and tides surging could be heard behind him, causing ripples to splash. A blood-red sun was setting slowly on that long river. The evening sun dyed the skies red in a tragically beautiful scene. Even the river surface was stained red and transformed into a blood river with a torrential blood stench. "Look, that's the legacy phenomenon of Soaring Feather Sect. The ancient phenomenon, Long River Sunset." A series of exclamations came from the crowd. With the boost of his golden core phenomenon, the paragon of Soaring Feather Sect was invigorated. He looked much more relaxed as his speed increased, and he sprinted up the peak. Galaxy Vortex. The paragon of Heavenly Dipper Sect could not withstand it any longer and released his golden core phenomenon as well. Night descended instantly. The skies above his head were lined with stars that sparkled in a bedazzling manner. All of a sudden, it was as though there was a magnetic force. The stars that filled the skies began swiveling into a gigantic vortex. Countless stars collided and sparks flew everywhere, releasing a shuddering energy fluctuation. The center of the vortex seemed as though it could destroy everything. The paragon of Heavenly Dipper Sect howled deeply and his speed exploded. The other paragons of the second group released their golden core phenomenons one after another. Instantly, many ancient phenomenons flashed through the voids in a shocking manner. Chapter 734, Nature Reversion. Chapter 734, Nature Reversion. All the cultivators in the vicinity of the myriad phenomenon peak felt their blood pump at the sight of that. This was the only opportunity to witness the clash between many ancient phenomenons. Although there were millions of cultivators in the cultivation world, only the 100,000 of them that were in Myriad Phenomenon City would get the opportunity to witness this. "Look, that's my Formless Monastery's legacy ancient phenomenon, the Bodhi Tree Shadow. Senior brother Yongren will definitely be able to make it to the first group under that Bodhi tree." Senior Sister Ling released her golden core phenomenon as well. The temperature around Ling Han of Snowdrift Valley dipped and sparkling. Crystallized snowflakes fell one after another from the skies. Although the snowflakes looked weak, each of them possessed frightening killing power. The ancient phenomenon, omnidirectional snowstorm. The pressure on the cultivators of the second group was reduced immensely after they released their golden core phenomenons, and their speeds gradually increased. However, things were clearer for the 17 nascent souls on the clouds. Although the paragons of the second group released many ancient phenomenons, it was still relatively difficult for them to catch up to the 8 people of the first group. It was true that those paragons were able to leap through several stone steps easily with the use of their golden core phenomenons. However, the pressure would only increase as they got closer to the peak. Before long, the paragons of the second group would slow down again. Furthermore, the 8 people of the first group had yet to release their golden core phenomenons. The moment the 8 of them released their golden core phenomenons, the gap between them and the cultivators of the second group would open up once more. Rise! Wu Feng of Purple Firmament sect shouted and channeled his golden core to its limits. A scarlet glow enveloped his face, and it gradually turned purple. In the blink of an eye, his face was covered by a purple glow. All of a sudden, a purple chi floated over from the east and enveloped Wu Feng's body. Behind him was a faint figure of an elderly figure with gray beard and hair riding on a bull. Although his appearance was blurry, he released a boundless might. The ancient phenomenon, Eastern Purple Chi. Purple Chi was the chi of a venerable and was incomparably noble. Wu Feng's aura exploded along with his speed as he dashed towards the first group. Humph! A cold glint flashed through the eyes of the paragon of Malevolent Earth sect as he shouted, unwilling to be left behind. A boundless malevolent chi spread around him and rumbled. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a gigantic scythe. The scythe was black as ink and resembled a fearsome weapon from deep in the 9 hells that could reap all life. The ancient phenomenon, Malevolent Earth Scythe. Whoosh! The paragon of Malevolent Earth sect pointed forward. The gigantic Malevolent Earth scythe cut a pitch-black arc in midair, as though it could cleave the void into 2. The paragon of Malevolent Earth sect sprinted along the arc that was ripped. Amitabha! The paragon of Wisdom Monastery chanted a Buddhist proclamation, and his eyes shone with the light of wisdom. He conjured a unique dermic seal with his hands, and the power of phenomenon around him surged. Gradually, mysterious halos of light began appearing behind him, emanating a flawless saint glow. The glow shone down on the world as though it could purify all living beings. The ancient phenomenon, boundless Buddha light. Paragons that could reach this level were all prideful. All of them wanted to advance further and were not willing to fall behind others. However, the 8 in the first group were still far ahead in the lead. Gradually, as time passed by and everyone got closer to the peak, the speed of Little Fatty, Demoness Ji, Ling Han, Wu Feng and the others in the second group decreased as they showed signs of exhaustion. Before long, almost all the cultivators in the second group were at their limits. They scattered and stood on different stone steps, unable to advance further. Hurry, look, there are 2 paragons on the same step. That's right. By the looks of it, there will be a grueling battle after the elimination battle. There were 2 people on the 78th stone step. One of them was Demoness Ji, and the other was Duan Qingping of Clear Wind Temple. Both of them panted and were exhausted. Duan Qingping's gaze roamed around Demoness Ji's body wantonly, and he gave an evil smile. Fiend Maiden, you sure are unlucky to bump into me. Is that so? Demoness Ji snickered. If that's the case, please be gentler later on, fellow Taoist. Don't worry. Duan Qingping replied lustfully, I'll definitely be gentle with you. Although Duan Qingping sounded flirtatious, and he had an intoxicated expression as though he was charmed, the depths of his eyes shone with a cold glint. There were 2 other people in the second group that stood on the same stone step. One of them was Little Fatty, and the other was Qian of Illusion Fiend Cult. The both of them exchanged glances. Qian laughed sinisterly. He used his hand to slice across his own throat with a gesture and did not conceal the killing intent in his eyes at all. Little Fatty pouted and reared his head to look upwards. In reality, he had strength remaining, but he was not confident of ascending another stone step. Furthermore, the Paragon of Wisdom Monastery stood on the next stone step. If he failed to ascend further and ended up severely injured by the power of the myriad phenomenon peak, it would be extremely embarrassing. Little Fatty pondered for a moment, but chose not to advance. That's interesting. We'll be able to see 2 fights between paragons at the very least. That's right. Things will be much bloodier in a battle between the paragons. I heard that in paragons in previous ranking battles bled, and it wasn't rare for them to die on the spot as well. That's only natural. All of these paragons are prideful, and none of them would bow down to the other. It's only normal for them to fight to the death, especially if their sects had feuds to begin with. The cultivators watching discussed heatedly with excited faces. Naturally, all of them wanted to witness more ranking battles. The positions of the paragons in the second group are almost fixed, and there won't be much changes to the rankings anymore. Yes, the outcome has basically been decided. Suddenly, someone exclaimed and pointed to the myriad phenomenon peak in shock. Hurry, look, there's someone there. That's Su Zimo. Everyone was drawn into the 8 people in the first group and the countless ancient phenomenons in the second group. They had almost forgotten about Su Zimo, who was taking his time down below. Something isn't right. He seems to be faster than before. Indeed, he has gotten much faster. How could this be? Normally, the pressure experienced by a cultivator increased the closer they were to the peak. As such, they would naturally slow down as well. However, none of the cultivators present could figure out why Su Zimo's speed increased instead, as though he could not feel the pressure from the mountain. What those cultivators did not know was that Su Zimo was already at perfected golden core realm. He was at a new level of understanding towards his core. He had already comprehended most of the marks and auras left behind by the ancient phenomenons on Myriad Phenomenon Peak, and there were not many remaining. Furthermore, his speed of comprehension increased as he advanced as well. Within a short period of time, he could experience the obscurities and mysteriousness of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend Taoists behind their phenomenons. The aura around Su Zimo became increasingly pure. It was as though he had reverted to the state of resonating with nature. The 17 nascent souls on the clouds felt their hearts skip a beat when they sensed the change in Su Zimo. All of their eyes shone brightly with looks of disbelief. Chapter 735, World Cleansing Green Lotus. Chapter 735, World Cleansing Green Lotus. What was the point of cultivating? It was to remove the facade of things and revert to the origin of nature. That was also the reason why cultivators of the Golden Core realm were referred to as perfected beings. However, throughout history, there have been too few cultivators who were able to understand that level of wisdom. It was a process of comprehension to obtain the truth and break free from the restraints of heaven and earth. By removing the facades and reverting to the true self, one is free from the struggles of life and death. Anybody that could comprehend that possessed supreme wisdom. At that moment, Su Zimo was passing through an ancient path along the marks left behind by his predecessors. Eventually, he allowed the distinct auras of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend Taoists in his heart to harmonize with his golden core perfectly and arrived at the realm of reverting to nature. It seems like a golden era has truly arrived in Tianhuang mainland. Monk In Lu lamented emotionally. It's extremely rare for a monster incarnate that has such immense fortune and wisdom to appear. To think that 2 of them would be born consecutively in this era. Seems like Diin has a match. Fufu. Perfected Lord Honey chuckled proudly with disdain in his eyes as he shook his head. Indeed, that lad has great wisdom and fortune. However, he's far from comparable to Diin. We'll talk about that when he can catch up to Diin's footsteps. Right now, he isn't qualified to be compared with Diin. Monk In Lu did not reply. That was because Diin was already at the peak at that moment. On the peak, Qian stood with his hands behind his back. His figure was faintly visible through the clouds, and he emanated an unparalleled dominance as he looked down on all other cultivators. Qian was going to leave his name on the ancient phenomenon stele. He was the true number one perfected being. He was also the first to do so in 1,000 years. Although the 17 nascent souls present were once top cultivators that dominated in their time, none of them were able to accomplish this feat. Qian shifted his gaze. When he saw Su Zimo, who was advancing from the back, he could not help but snort coldly. Clang, clang. Finally, someone in the first group could not withstand the pressure and released a golden core phenomenon. The sound of swords buzzing reverberated relentlessly through the world. A series of chilling sword lights appeared behind Qian. They blanketed the skies densely and tore through air. Heavenly encompassing swords. It was a golden core phenomenon of the Tao of the Sword and was created by a mighty figure of the ancient era. It was ranked 41 on the previous phenomenon ranking. To think that it would possess such might when it was released by Qian, most sword cultivators revealed ferocity externally. Given the situation, a cold glint flashed through Hang Qiuyu's eyes as he released a golden core phenomenon as well. Sure, sure, sure. Sword chi streaked through the air at an extremely fast speed, leaving sword scars through the void in its wake. The void seemed to be sliced into tiny blocks. It was the legacy phenomenon of Sword Sect, startling sword chi. Both phenomenons of the Sword Tao were extremely sharp and sliced the surrounding spirit energy into tiny pieces. Without the two of them controlling things intentionally, the two sword phenomenons showed signs of competing against one another. Sword cultivators specialized in cultivating their ferocities. When two sword cultivators clashed, a victor must be decided. Hang Qiuyu and Qian supported their golden core phenomenons and dashed towards the 100th stone step. Immediately after, Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace released his golden core phenomenon as well. One after another, streaks of lightning surged above his head and formed a bedazzling sea of lightning behind him. 5 divine thunderbolts shrouded around his head and protected him. Apocalyptic 5 thunders. Corpse Mountain. Rintu of Azura sect pointed forward with a cold gaze. Before him, a series of corpses with a foul stench appeared endlessly. They stacked onto one another messily and created a massive mountain. Rintu stepped on the corpse mountain emotionlessly and continued ascending. I heard that the corpse mountain of that golden core phenomenon is made from people that died in the hands of Rintu. Ah? A cultivator exclaimed and chills ran down his body as he said with a trembling voice, "There's got to be millions of people there, right?" Rintu's voice sounded again before he could finish. Blood sea. Splash. The blood that seeped out from beneath the corpse mountain grew and transformed into a boundless sea in the blink of an eye. The sea was blood-colored and gave off a cruel aura of despair and death. The corpse mountain floated in the sea of blood. Rintu stood on top of the corpse mountain with a torrential ferocity as he crossed the 100th step directly and continued ahead. It's the corpse mountain blood sea. To think that Rintu would fuse them together. I recall that the previous person who cultivated it to such a frightening level was an expert from Azura sect 1,000 years ago, and he's this generation's Azura. In reality, Corpse Mountain and Blood Sea were two ancient phenomenons that were ranked extremely high in the phenomenon ranking. Their might became even more frightening when they were combined as one. 1,000 years ago, the Azura, Yin Beichen, ascended to the top of the myriad phenomenon peak with his Corpse Mountain Blood Sea and took the number 1 position. All 8 of them are rare peerless paragons. Perfected Lord Luo Shui sighed gently. Any one of them could easily take the top spot in previous Golden Core phenomenon rankings. To think that all of them would be gathered together in this generation. Furthermore, there's an almost invincible monster incarnate above all of them. Dean. Bang, bang, bang. Monk Ju Chun, Pang Yu and Monk Jian Kong released their Golden Core phenomenons one after another as well. A golden light descended. Monk Ju Chun seemed to be veiled by a golden shade and shone brightly. A 7th-floor pagoda descended with a blinding brilliance and hovered above monk Qian Kong. It poured down with a divine light like a waterfall that protected him. The legacy phenomenon of Hollow Monastery, 7th-floor pagoda, the golden core phenomenons were turning increasingly frightening. Compared to Long River Sunset and Galaxy Vortex from earlier, they were at a whole different level in strength. Countless gazes were fixed on Ming Zhan. He was the only one who had not released his golden core phenomenon among the 8 people. Fu, Monk Yuan Kong sneered. It's probably because he's got some worthless golden core phenomenon that's useless even if he releases it. That's why he's choosing to force himself through everything. Before he could finish his sentence, Ming Zhan conjured a hand seal with both hands and released an extremely terrifying aura. Immediately after, a green lotus appeared behind him and hovered in midair before swiveling slowly. Each petal was etched with obscure and complicated patterns. Slowly, the petals opened up and the green lotus blossomed. One after another, mysterious lights spread and shone. A fragrance wafted out from the center of the lotus platform. The green lotus blossomed as though it could purify all the evil in this world. The moment the green lotus blossomed, be it the corpse mountain blood sea or the 7th-floor pagoda, the golden core phenomenons of the other 7 people shuddered for a brief moment as though they were impacted significantly. What is that phenomenon? That phenomenon looks a little familiar. I seem to have heard of it somewhere. Ah! Suddenly, a few exclamations sounded one after another above the clouds. The few perfected lords of the Buddhist monasteries bolted upright in shock as they glared at the green lotus behind Ming Zhan with disbelief in their eyes. World-cleansing green lotus. Slowly, Monk Yuan Kong uttered 4 words. The crowd was in an uproar. World-cleansing green lotus, the legacy phenomenon of Fahua Monastery, was a top-tier golden core phenomenon of the Buddhist monasteries. When cultivated to its peak, its might was even above the 7th-floor pagoda. Chapter 736, Untitled. Chapter 736, Untitled. That phenomenon was the legacy phenomenon of Fahua Monastery, a supersect that was destroyed 10,000 years ago. It could only be comprehended by cultivating the number 1 secret classic of the Golden Core realm, the mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra. However, the mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra was lost for a long time in that catastrophe 10,000 years ago. In that catastrophe 10,000 years ago, Fahua and Daming monasteries were destroyed and countless cultivation techniques and secret skills were lost. Even after all these years, there were still cultivators searching for those cultivation techniques and secret skills. Nobody expected this unknown young monk to cultivate a golden core phenomenon that had been lost for 10,000 years. There was a high probability that this young monk had a deep relationship with the destroyed Fahua Monastery. Monk Yuan Kong, Monk Wei Fu, and everyone else looked at Ming Zhan with a glint in their eyes, resembling hungry, ferocious beasts that caught sight of a prey. Monk Yin Lu frowned slightly with a worried expression. A man's wealth was his own ruin by causing another's greed. By releasing the world-cleansing green lotus, Ming Zhan was exposing himself to the greed of others. As the 8 people of the first group released their golden core phenomenons, the distance between them increased and gradually, there was a distinction between them. Rin Tu of Azura sect was right at the front. He was already at the 105th stone step. That was a rather formidable height. In the previous golden core phenomenon ranking, Dean, who was number 1, merely made it to the 99th stone step. The fact that Rin Tu was able to reach that height meant that his strength was stronger than Dean 100 years ago. Alas, Dean suppressed his cultivation for 100 years and continued comprehending the power of the golden core realm. The reason for his return was to become the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking once more and suppress all other paragons. Ah! Rin Tu roared into the skies and his blood chi surged. Green veins appeared on his neck like spirit snakes, and he had a menacing expression of indignance. He wanted to ascend to the peak of the mountain. He was indignant. He did not wish to be inferior to others. However, the pressure from the peak was way too terrifying. Even climbing another stone step was almost impossible for him, let alone ascending to the peak. Dean stood high and above with his hands behind his back. He gazed at the struggling Rintu with a faint ridicule in his eyes. One of them was screaming from the depths of his heart. The other was indifferent. One stood below. The other was at the peak of the mountain. The difference was glaring. It was the same below for Su Chang of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Monk Jian Kong, Pang Yu, and the others. It was like an emperor looking down at the masses from the top. It did not matter how the masses struggled. None of them could take down his dominance. A series of sighs came from the crowd. It had to be said that for those paragons, it was a tragedy that they were born in the same generation as Dean. Gradually, Rintu lowered his head. He was already exhausted. His limit was at the 105th stone step. Although the difference between him and the peak was only 3 stone steps, the distance between them was almost equivalent to the gap between heaven and earth. All of a sudden, exclamations sounded from the crowd beneath. The stone step that Rintu stood on quaked heavily for a brief moment. Rintu glanced sideways, and the killing intent in his eyes surged. Not far from him, Su Chang of Zephyr Thunder Palace had managed to arrive at the 105th stone step as well, using his apocalyptic 5 thunders. Su Chang panted heavily and was drenched in sweat. A stir broke out amongst the crowd. This meant that the 2 paragons would clash in the upcoming ranking battle. Finally, there would be a showdown between the Corpse Mountain Bloodsea and Apocalyptic 5 Thunders. He. Rintu let out an unsettling laughter that sent shivers down one's spine. Su Chang merely smirked coldly against Rintu's killing intent without any fear. At their level, none of them would back off from a battle unless it was against an unstoppable opponent like Dean. Rintu wanted to kill Su Chang. Su Chang wanted to furnish his reputation by suppressing Rintu. Beneath Rintu and Su Chang was Monk Jian Kong of Hollow Monastery. 104th stone step. That was Monk Jian Kong's limits. He gazed up at Rintu and Su Chang above him with a boundless indignance in his eyes. Before he entered the ancient battlefield, he wanted to challenge Dean. When Dean ascended the peak earlier on, he realized the difference between them. However, he felt that he was definitely within the top 3 of the phenomenon ranking. To think that he could only be satisfied with the 4th spot right now. Hurry, look, there's going to be another massive battle. Interesting, it's going to be a fight between the Buddhist monasteries. A clamor broke out from the crowd again. Monk Jian Kong turned over instinctively. Another person had appeared on the 104th stone step. It was the young monk called Mingzhan. A blossomed green lotus hovered behind Mingzhan. It looked extremely ordinary, but it gave off a frightening aura. Monk Jian Kong's pupils constricted. He was not bothered about this young monk prior to this. But now, it seemed like his 4th spot on the phenomenon ranking was not confirmed just yet. Mingzhan did not even glance at Monk Jian Kong, merely looking up at the 105th stone step with a calm expression. His foot lingered for a moment before he continued forward. What's he doing? Is he trying to get to the next stone step? There's no wonder why that's the #1 mystic classic of the Golden Core realm. Many cultivators were dumbstruck when they noticed Mingzhan's actions. However, Mingzhan merely ascended half the distance to the next stone step when he swayed and grunted before landing back on the 104th stone step again. Fu. Monk Jian Kong could not help but sneer. You overestimate yourself? Mingzhan clutched his chest and blood oozed out from the corner of his lips. He merely glanced at Monk Jian Kong but did not argue. Monk Yin Lu sighed gently. Humph. Perfected Lord Luo Shui glared at Monk Yuan Kong and said coldly, if someone had not injured this young monk earlier on by abusing his seniority, he might have already ascended to the 105th stone step. Many cultivators had a sudden recollection. Prior to the fight for the phenomenon ranking, Monk Yuan Kong used Sanskrit to injure Mingzhan. Mingzhan had ascended the myriad phenomenon peak with an injury. 2 people stood on the 103th stone step beneath Monk Jian Kong and Mingzhan as well. Hang Qiuyu of Sword Sect and Dugu Jian of the Dugu clan. The 2 great sword cultivators were going to duke it out. This fight for the phenomenon ranking was way more intense than anyone had imagined. There were already 3 fights alone for the ranking battle of the top 10 spots. This was rare in previous phenomenon rankings. After the 2 of them came Peng Yu of Overlord Palace on the 102nd step. On the 101st stone step was monk Zhu Qian of Diamond Monastery. All 8 people of the first group had made it past the 100th stone step. The fight for the phenomenon ranking this time round sure is unusually intense. To think that there are so many paragons gathered. Heh, it's time to place your bets. There's no doubt about who is at the top of the phenomenon ranking. Let's guess who will be the 2nd, 4th, and... Before that cultivator completed his sentence, his gaze swept and froze on the myriad phenomenon peak while his mouth fell agape gradually. What's wrong? Some cultivators asked as they turned towards that person's gaze. We seem to have forgotten about someone. That cultivator could not contain the shock in his eyes. On the myriad phenomenon peak, a figure was ascending rapidly, surging into the skies, surpassing one figure after another. 90th stone step, 91st stone step, 98th stone step. Even after the 100th stone step, the figure's speed did not show any signs of diminishing and was still advancing forward. Chapter 737, Peak. Chapter 737, Peak. That person sure is terrifying. He did not release his golden core phenomenon for the first 100 steps and charged through them merely relying on his physique. It's said that his physique is comparable to a pure-blooded ferocious beast. Indeed, nothing was exaggerated at all. That's nothing much. Dean only released his golden core phenomenon after the 100th stone step as well. At that moment, countless gazes were fixed on that green figure on the myriad phenomenon peak. As everyone discussed, Su Zimo had already stepped foot on the 100th stone step. Boom! The moment he landed on that stone step, Su Zimo's eyes shone brightly as he gave a slight frown. The pressure that came from above had increased significantly after the 100th stone step. Even with his physique, he was feeling the strain. Of course, that was because he did not use the power of his inner core. Su Zimo estimated that if he used the power of his inner core and burst forth with the full strength of his blood qi, he could reach the peak of the myriad phenomenon peak even without releasing his golden core phenomenon. Of course, that was impractical. Perfected Lord Yujun warned him that using the power of his inner core on the myriad phenomenon peak would be courting death. Crack, crack, crack. The skies above Su Zimo's head tore repeatedly and lightning flashed. A heavy downpour rained down, turning into a torrential flood with endless meteors. It was as though the apocalypse had descended. Boom, 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 boom. For gigantic, heavenly piercing stone pillars stood in the floods. At the top of the stone pillars was a shell that covered the skies, etched with mysterious patterns that seemed like they contained endless secrets of the universe. The 4 limbs suppressed the raging tides, and the shell supported the broken skies. The primordial divine turtle had descended, rearing its head into a wild howl and a bright gaze. This was the first time that most of the cultivators present witnessed that phenomenon personally. Their expressions changed and endless shock filled their eyes. That primordial phenomenon had been lost for a long time. Even the 17 nascent souls present had not witnessed it personally before. There's no wonder why it's a primordial divine being that protected the masses. To think that it would possess such a might. Monk In Lu lamented. Perfected Lord Luo Shui said deeply, the human race will definitely prosper with the resurgence of these lost primordial phenomenons. Perfected Lord Honey and Monk Yuan Kong merely smirked coldly with nonchalance. Although Perfected Lord Yujun was expressionless, there was a hint of worry in his eyes. While the appearance of a primordial phenomenon represented the arrival of a golden era, it could also imply that an unimaginable catastrophe was approaching. If the human race could tide through it, they would prosper. If they could not, there was a high chance they would be annihilated. In the ancient era, multiple emperors rose, and a supreme, peerless existence that was feared throughout history, such as the human emperor, surfaced. Those were the reasons that built the current state of Tianhuang mainland. But now that the emperors have passed on and the human emperor left Tianhuang mainland a long time alone, who was going to save the human race if a catastrophe truly arrived? I might be worrying for nothing. Perfected Lord Yujun shook his head and smiled deprecatingly. The pressure on Su Zimo diminished significantly after he released the primordial divine turtle. He arrived at the 101st stone step and surpassed monk Zhu Chun without pausing to continue ahead. 102nd step, 103rd step. Monk Zhu Chun, Pang Yu, and Hang Qiu could only watch as Su Zimo passed them by. The three of them had conflicted expressions. In the battle beneath the human emperor's palace 20 years ago, the paragons of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects were left dead and injured. Most of them were despondent from the setback and relegated to be a part of the masses. The three of them were the only ones that overcame their inner demons and stood up again. They advanced honorably and regained their spots as the number one disciples of their sects in the Golden Core realm. A large part of the reason for their return was to erase the shame from their past. They wanted to fight Su Zimo again. However, Su Zimo did not give them that chance at all. He surpassed them with ease on the myriad phenomenon peak. Everyone knew that Su Zimo had a double phenomenon. Now that he was already here with a single phenomenon, where could he advance with two of them? Could he truly match Dean? Gradually, silence filled the vicinity of the myriad phenomenon peak. All the cultivators wanted to know where Su Zimo could reach. Dean stood at the top and glared down at Su Zimo expressionlessly. Bang! Su Zimo had ascended to the 105th stone step. Su Cheng was emotional as he glared at Su Zimo sternly with widened eyes. Dozens of days ago, he fought against Su Zimo. At that time, Su Zimo released a double phenomenon and fused them together to crush his apocalyptic five thunders. And now, he was already at this level with just a single golden core phenomenon. This meant that the power of Su Zimo's golden core phenomenon had grown to yet another level within these dozens of days. Su Cheng's guess was both correct and incorrect. It was true that the power of Su Zimo's golden core phenomenon had grown. However, it was not during these dozens of days, but on his journey of ascending the myriad phenomenon peak earlier on. He comprehended the marks and auras left behind by ancient experts on the myriad phenomenon peak and gained insight into the Daos of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects from the Qi condensation, foundation establishment, and golden core realm. His golden core phenomenon had evolved completely. While outsiders might not be able to sense it, Su Zimo understood that change the greatest. He stood on the 105th stone step and lingered for a moment with closed eyes. All of a sudden, Su Zimo opened his eyes and roared into the skies. His golden core swiveled and a scorching heat wave was released. Bang! Boom! Boom! The mountains toppled and volcanoes spewed. Scarlet lava blanketed the floor and flames blazed for thousands of kilometers. A gigantic anaconda tunneled out from underground and soared into the skies, flapping its wings that were burned scarlet and almost transparent as it reared its head into a roar. The primordial soaring serpent. Two primordial phenomenons had descended. Su Zimo's aura exploded and he stomped on the ground heavily, soaring into the skies like an arrow as he crossed the 106th, 107th steps. Boom! In one go, Su Zimo ascended to the peak of the myriad phenomenon peak in one go, relying on his double phenomenon. Ah! After a momentary silence, the crowd broke into exclamations. Everything happened too quickly that many cultivators had yet to react to it. In the blink of an eye, there was another person at the peak of the myriad phenomenon peak. The mountain was 108,000 feet tall and clouds floated around it. Two figures stood among them, faintly visible and resembling peerless emperors that looked down on the mortal realm. Many cultivators looked extremely excited. Two people on the mountain peak implied that there was going to be an earth-shaking fight between them in the ranking battle. Heis. Perfected Lord Yujun sighed. This was the outcome he was most reluctant to witness as a cultivator of Enigma Palace hosting the phenomenon ranking. The loss of either of these two peerless paragons would not benefit the human race. At the peak, Dean gazed at Su Zimo, who was beside him, and smirked with a fake smile. Take a good look at this picturesque scenery, this wonderful world, and the beautiful skies. Enjoy the look of reverence from the other cultivators. This might be the last things you can ever enjoy. Is that so? Su Zimo replied with an indifferent expression. Su Zimo, you are truly ignorant. Do you know what this peak of the myriad phenomenon peak means for you? Dean pointed below his feet and gave an unsettling smile. This is your death's gate. By ascending this peak, you've crossed the gates of death. Since you have a death wish, all I can do is fulfill that for you. Chapter 738, Ranking Battle. Chapter 738, Ranking Battle. Su Zimo merely scoffed coldly against Di Yin's provocations. Things between the two of them were irreconcilable, and one of them was bound to die soon. It was needless to speak further. Unlike the bottom of the mountain, Su Zimo no longer experienced any pressure from the myriad phenomenon peak the moment he ascended its peak. It was as though they had obtained the recognition of this ancient mountain. Su Zimo turned around and surveyed his surroundings. It was spacious at the peak of the mountain with nothing in sight except for a tall stele that was erected in the middle. There were hundreds of names etched densely on it. As he stood before the stele, Su Zimo remained silent, and his feelings were complicated. There was joy, pride, and sorrow. Countless years have passed since the ancient times, and the phenomenon ranking was held consistently once every 100 years. However, only these few hundred cultivators managed to ascend to the peak. From today on, his name would also be etched on that stele and be passed down through history, no matter how much time passed through rain or shine. He ought to feel proud and elated. The sorrow came from the fact that he could not share this joy with someone. Without that person, he would not have had the chance to even cultivate, let alone leave his name on this ancient phenomenon stele. It seems like I've gotten closer to you again. Su Zimo lowered his head before the stele and murmured with a faint smile. Although he was still very far away from that ethereal world, he believed that he would definitely arrive there sooner or later and catch up with her footsteps. The two of you can condense your spirit energies and leave your names on the ancient phenomenon stele. Perfected Lord Yujun's voice sounded. Su Zimo and Dean obeyed and left their names on the stele. The style of the handwriting on the stele differed from person to person. Some were pointy, some were restrained, some were coarse and firm, some were elegant with long strokes, some were sturdy and antiquated, while others were wild and casual. The bearings of their predecessors could be seen through their handwriting. All the cultivators beneath the peak of the mountain let out envious looks. The Golden Core phenomenon ranking was conducted once every 100 years. However, the ancient phenomenon stele was there for all eternity. Any cultivator that made it into Myriad Phenomenon City are all worthy of the term paragon. Right then, Perfected Lord Yujun said slowly, today's accomplishments does not translate to future glory. Everyone, you have to work hard and not slack off. A name left behind on the ancient phenomenon stele might not be proof of one's future accomplishments. Among the several hundred cultivators, many of them died as well. The heavens are often jealous of those who are talented. They were bound to endure unimaginable hardship and dangers. At the same time, there were also cultivators that became emperors without leaving their names on the ancient phenomenon stele. Nothing in the world was absolute. Perfected Lord Yujun continued, the new phenomenon ranking is now out with the end of the elimination battle. After a slight rest, the cultivators on the list will undergo a final ranking battle. The ranking battle was held at a raised platform at the foot of the mountain. The platform was 100 feet tall and extremely spacious, with enough room for 10,000 people to stand on it at the same time. There were a total of 18 ranking battles this time round. Of course, what everyone was waiting for was the fight between the top 10 of the phenomenon ranking. The final match would be between Su Zimo and Dean for the top of the ranking. After the elimination battle, cultivators on the phenomenon ranking had to take a short rest to recover their stamina. In Su Zimo's group, apart from Ji Qingtian, the others, Little Fatty, Demoness Ji, and Ming Zhan, had to partake in a fight against another paragon for the final ranking battle. Little Fatty was up against Qian Li of Illusion Fiend Cult from the Fiend sections. Demoness Ji was up against Duan Qingping of Clear Wind Temple from the Immortal sections. Ming Zhan was up against Monk Jian Kong of Hollow Monastery from the Buddhist monasteries. For cultivators to arrive on the same stone step, it was proof that the difference between the power of their phenomenons was not too great. However, power was not the only determining factor in a fight between cultivators. It was a face-off between their techniques, spirit arts, secret skills, and even experience in battle. Young monk, have this elixir. Xiaoning arrived beside Ming Zhan and handed the latter an elixir. Ming Zhan was wounded by monk Yuan Kong previously and ascended the myriad phenomenon peak with his injuries. Xiaoning could tell that his injuries had worsened and hence the gesture. Take it and heal up quickly so that you can fight with your full strength. Su Zimo nodded. Although he had quite a number of elixirs in his storage bag, the quality and effectiveness of elixirs from Elixir Yang sect was the best. Ming Zhan's cultivation technique came from the Buddhist monasteries. His recovery speed was shocking. With that elixir and some rest, he could recover almost entirely before his battle. Thank you, benefactor. Ming Zhan received the elixir and swallowed it. The ranking battle began the moment afternoon came. In order to prevent paragons from dying in the ranking battle, as long as any cultivator could not win and left the radius of the stone platform in time, it would be considered as a defeat. The battle would come to an immediate end. The first battle was for the 98th spot of the phenomenon ranking. The two paragons that fought came from the upper sections. Although it was near the end of the phenomenon ranking, the battle was also unusually intense. Both paragons took turns to release countless spirit arts and secret skills. Their variations in both melee and ranged combat was endless. Eventually, both paragons released their golden core phenomenons and fought till they were completely exhausted before one of them took the win with a slight lead. All the cultivators watching below were amazed. They were also able to benefit immensely from the fight between the paragons. 12 battles were over as time passed and evening approached. The next match was for the 20th spot of the phenomenon ranking. The two paragons were Demoness Ji and Duan Qingping. On the stone platform, Demoness Ji bowed forward politely with her hands in front of her. She gave Duan Qingping a gentle smile as she said tenderly with watery clear eyes, "Big brother Duan, please." Duan Qingping froze momentarily with a lost look in his eyes. Immediately after, he frowned and could not help but shudder with a conflicted expression on his face. What's wrong with Duan Qingping? I didn't see Demoness Ji attack. Cries of surprises came from the crowd. Su Zimo nodded silently. Demoness Ji had gotten even better and more frightening with her bewitchment technique. Apart from the Buddhist monastery's paragons who were clear of worldly desires, any other cultivator could be charmed by Demoness Ji if they were distracted for a moment. Duan Qingping widened his eyes and glared around, howling at the top of his lungs. Black wind catastrophe. Pitch-black cyclones that howled furiously appeared and swarmed around Duan Qingping in a shuddering manner. The cyclones were so powerful that any cultivator that made contact with them would be ripped apart instantly. Duan Qingping realized that something was amiss and released his golden core phenomenon right away. Unfortunately, he had already lost the first move and was bewitched. It was difficult for him to regain his sanctity even with the release of his golden core phenomenon. Demoness Ji stood at the side and glared coldly without making a move. Like an insane, headless fly, Duan Qingping howled furiously on the stone platform as though he could not see Demoness Ji at all. He had already lost his mind completely. Humph! The perfected lord of Clear Wind Temple had a terrible expression when he saw that. Given the current situation, it won't be long before Duan Qingping spent his spirit energy and exhausted himself completely without Demoness Ji even making a move. Victory was decided. It was an effortless victory. Demoness Ji did not even have to release her golden core phenomenon. Chapter 739. Chapter 739. All Swords United. The next battle was for the 14th spot of the phenomenon ranking. Little Fatty was up against Qian Li of Illusion Fiend Cult. The cultivation techniques of Illusion Fiend Cult lean on affecting one's mental state. Be careful. Demonish G reminded Little Fatty out of goodwill on her way down. Little Fatty, Demonish G, and even Ji Chengtian, Shijian, and the others were from different sections. In fact, they were opposing factions of immortals between fiends and had no interactions at all. However, the group of them now had a degree of connection with Su Zimo at the core. Thank you. Little Fatty expressed his thanks. Little Fatty's Yellow Springs phenomenon would not have been able to reach this spot before he entered the Astral Dragon Sputum Lair. It would have been difficult for him to be on the top 50 spot of the phenomenon ranking, let alone the top 20. But now, Little Fatty was acknowledged by the Yellow Springs diagram. Although he had not cultivated an essence spirit and was still unable to make use of that dermic weapon from the ancient era, his Yellow Springs phenomenon underwent a complete transformation and was a far cry from before. Two people stood on the stone platform. Qian Li's eyes were bright, and suddenly, a series of horrifying images appeared behind him. Countless living beings were tied onto scorching iron poles and smoke steamed from their sizzling, burning flesh as they struggled and howled endlessly. On the other side, a gigantic stone mill appeared in the void. Millions of living beings were pulled in by the stone mill as it swiveled and crushed slowly, grounding their flesh and bones as grisly blood spilled onto the ground. Although the blood and flesh of the living beings were crushed, their consciousness was still present. In the blink of an eye, the splattered blood and flesh was reanimated and drawn into the stone mill to repeat the same process again, causing them to endure the same pain endlessly. They underwent a continuous reincarnation to repeat the same cycle over and over again. Many cultivators felt chills and mental scars when they witnessed that image. The ancient phenomenon, Limitless Hell. A series of images from hell surfaced behind Qian Li in a sinister manner. Yellow Springs. Little Fatty pointed forward with a grim expression. A surging yellow river appeared behind him with corpses and souls that floated and struggled within it. The Yellow Springs gushed and drowned the limitless hell behind Qian Li directly. Many of the living beings in the limitless hell obtained true relief when they entered the Yellow Springs, no longer subjected to the endless torment and suffering. Crack, crack, crack. The limitless hell creaked and was on the verge of collapsing. Qian Li's expression turned frightfully pale as he bolted in retreat and managed to get out of the stone platform in time. Thank you for giving in. Little Fatty let out a deep breath and closed off his golden core phenomenon before grinning brightly with cupped fists. There were only 4 ranking battles left after his. The next battle was between the sword cultivators. As the number 1 disciple of the Golden Core Realm and Sword Sect, Hang Qiuyu naturally had to defend the glory of his sect. The reputation of Sword Sect would definitely be affected if he was ranked below a sword cultivator of another sect or faction. This was a battle that he could not lose. Hang Qiuyu believed that he would not lose either. There was no way the ancient phenomenon of Sword Sect, startling Sword Qi, would lose to this person's heavenly encompassing swords. The two of them stood on the stone platform. Before the fight even began, the perfected Lord of Sword Sect spoke. Are you willing to join Sword Sect? Many cultivators in the vicinity let out envious looks. Dugu Jin was already acknowledged by Sword Sect, one of the immortal sects, before he even fought Hang Qiuyu. Sword Sect was a place of pilgrimage for all sword cultivators in the world. Countless cultivation techniques and secret skills of the Tao of the Sword in the cultivation world has been amassed by the sect throughout history. It had a wealth of knowledge. Sword Sect was the place where every single sword cultivator dreamed of reaching. On the stone platform, Dugu Jian was expressionless as usual even after Sword Sect's invitation and merely shook his head gently. A stir broke out amongst the crowd. They were rejected. Dugu Jian rejected without hesitation towards an invitation of Sword Sect. Young man, let me remind you that you will only be able to comprehend the true Tao of the sword in Sword Sect. The perfected Lord of Swords sect frowned slightly and pondered for a moment before continuing. It isn't easy for you to reach your current attainments. Since you have quite a decent potential in the Tao of the Sword, I can offer you another chance. Dugu Qian gazed at the sword in his hand and merely shook his head again. It was as though there was nothing else in the world apart from the sword in his hand. He did not believe in any sect or his gentry clan. The only thing he trusted was the sword in his hand. Dugu Qian's aura did not fit in with anyone in the vicinity, and he exuded an indescribable loneliness. He was the sort of sword cultivator that was truly frightening. His thoughts were concise, and he was not distracted by anything. The perfected Lord of Sword sect was expressionless and did not say anything more. The battle commenced. Buzz, buzz, almost at the same time. Dugu Qian and Hang Qiuyu struck at almost the same time as two unparalleled sword lights flashed through the air. They disappeared instantly at an extremely fast speed. Immediately after, two flashes of blood flickered. Both of them were injured at the same time. It was too fast. Many cultivators could not even react in time. The two sword beams deflected the moment they made contact, and both parties were already injured. Hang Qiuyu was struck in the right leg and Dugu Qian was struck on the left arm. Both their wounds were extremely deep and their robes were stained red instantly. Their injuries even possessed an extremely strong sword qi. As such, their wounds could only recover after the sword qi was purged completely. However, neither of them had the chance in such an intense fight where they could not afford to be distracted. Sword cultivators had the most frightening killing power. A single moment of distraction could result in death. Both of them attacked once again at almost the same time. Clang, clang. Their swords collided repeatedly in midair and let out the sounds of metal clashing as sparks flew everywhere. Their figures interweaved and only separated again after 3 seconds. A wave of shock and astonishment could be heard from the crowd. Dozens of injuries had appeared on both their bodies. Some were deep while others were superficial. In fact, some of them revealed the white bones beneath the flesh. Those bones were almost cut. Dugu Qian could not defend against Hang Qiuyu's sword. However, Hang Qiuyu could not defend against Dugu Qian's ferocity as well. Both of them were drenched and their blood qi deteriorated. If the stalemate continued, there was a chance that victory could be determined within a split second. Startling sword qi. Hang Qiuyu released the legacy phenomenon of sword sect, and a patch of sword qi gathered densely behind him. It was extremely sharp and bolted in the direction of Dugu Qian. At the same time, Hang Qiuyu bit his tongue gently and spat out a stream of essence blood that splashed onto the streaks of sword qi. The power of his phenomenon surged intensely. Instantly, Hang Qiuyu's expression turned extremely pale. That was a secret skill of sword sect, and the stream of essence blood took a huge toll on one's essence qi. That was a move that he would not have used unless it was absolutely necessary. The entire void was sliced apart by the streaks of startling sword qi. Dugu Qian barely released his heavenly encompassing swords when it was riddled with holes by the startling sword qi and shattered immediately. He's still not leaving? Many cultivators frowned. Dugu Qian no longer had any means to fight with the dispersion of his golden core phenomenon. If he continued to linger on the stone platform, he would definitely be minced mercilessly by the startling sword qi. There was no hint of fear or intention of retreating in Dugu Qian's eyes as he faced the incoming sword qi. He seemed to have comprehended something at that moment of life and death, and the aura around him began to transform. The startling sword qi that was pushing towards Dugu Qian started turning sluggish. Hang Qiuyu's eyes widened in alarm and fury. His golden core phenomenon was no longer in his control. Right in front of countless gazes, the streaks of sword qi fell in front of Dugu Qian, as though they were subdued by him. The perfected Lord of Sword sect yelled in shock. All swords united. Chapter 740. One has no competitors if he does not compete. Chapter 740. One has no competitors if he does not compete. All swords united was a supreme and invincible phenomenon of the Tao of the sword. It could suppress any other phenomenon of the Tao of the sword without fail. In the past, the Sword Emperor of Tianhuang mainland cultivated all swords united and controlled all the swords in the world. Every single sword in his path was subdued completely. Throughout history, even for cultivators of sword sect, only 10 people managed to cultivate all swords united. All 10 of them ended up as top-tier experts that ruled with dominance. On the stone platform, the power of phenomenon that belonged to Dugu Qian was initially about to disperse. However, in the blink of an eye, an even mightier power descended. Thousands of startling sword qi danced and swiveled in midair, streaking wildly with blinding streams of light in their wake. Although they were extremely sharp, they could not injure Dugu Qian at all. In fact, just as the sword qis were about to strike Dugu Qian, they changed directions agilely and wrapped around him. As he stood within the dense streaks of sword qi, Dugu Qian's edge shone brighter, and despite the hollowness in his eyes, they resembled two sharp swords. Hang Qiuyu's pupils constricted as he sensed danger. Not good. He was alarmed internally and released the sword escape technique of his sect without hesitation to speed out of the stone platform. Shoo! A bedazzling sword beam flashed instantly. Hang Qiuyu's figure vanished from the stone platform. The speed of his movement technique was truly startling. Some of the super sects in the cultivation world would possess secret escape techniques. Previously, Su Chang released the escape technique of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Zephyr Thunder Escape, to flee from Su Zimo's grasp. Some of the top-tier secret escape techniques could match and even surpass the speed of nascent souls during the short burst. Blood Escape, which Su Zimo had cultivated, was one of them as well. Clang, clang, clang. Under Dugu Qian's control, thousands of startling sword qi streaked through the air and pierced the location where Hang Qiuyu stood, leaving sword scars on the ground. Victory was already decided the moment Hang Qiuyu exited the stone platform. For paragons of that level, it was almost impossible to kill them if they were bent on escaping. Dugu Qian leaped down from the stone platform in silence. The perfected lord of sword sect frowned slightly and gazed at Dugu Qian's back in deep thought. It was down to the final 3 ranking battles. Next up was Monk Jian Kong and Ming Zhan. Monk Yuan Kong looked down at Ming Zhan from above and asked all of a sudden, "Ming Zhan, where did you obtain the mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra?" Ming Zhan frowned and did not reply immediately. Although he wasn't experienced in worldly affairs, he was no fool. Monk Wei Fu of Diamond Monastery at the side looked down with a burning gaze. He channeled a Sanskrit sound technique of the Buddhist monasteries and asked loudly, like a bell, "Ming Zhan, let me ask you, what are the 5 precepts of Buddhism?" Ming Zhan said deeply with a stern expression, "No killing, no stealing, no adultery, no lies, and no intoxication." "All right," Monk Wei Fu nodded. "Since you understand that you should not lie, you know that you aren't allowed to tell falsehoods and rubbish. Let me ask you, where did you obtain the mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra and who taught it to you?" Monk In Lu frowned. It was obvious that monks Wei Fu and Yuan Kong harbored designs on the mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra. However, Monk Wei Fu was shrewd and brought out the 5 precepts of Buddhism to push Ming Zhan to a dead end before coercing the latter to reveal the secret behind the mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra. Monk Wei Fu was in fact warning Ming Zhan that a monk should not lie. Ming Zhan replied deeply with a calm expression, "Regarding the mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra?" At that point, he paused suddenly. Notwithstanding monks Yuan Kong and Wei Fu, even the other nascent souls perked their ears in secret and awaited Ming Zhan's answer eagerly. If they could obtain any useful hint or clue within his words, they might be able to find the countless cultivation techniques and secret skills left behind by Fa Hua Monastery. "Hurry and speak," Monk Yuan Kong urged. "Where is the mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra?" Ming Zhan clasped his palms and replied earnestly, "Monks should not engage in falsehoods. Regarding the mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra, I don't wish to talk about it." Silence overwhelmed their surroundings. The faces of monks Yuan Kong and Wei Fu froze instantly. What did he mean that he did not wish to talk about it? No matter how much the two of them schemed, They had not expected that reply from Mingzhan. Little Fox could not help but let out a stifled chuckle. Indeed, Mingzhan did not lie. It was just because he did not wish to speak about it. His simple reply resolved the troubling question posed by the two perfected lords of the Buddhist monasteries. What a glib tongue indeed! Monk Yuan Kong said with a blackened expression, Jian Kong, teach this young monk a lesson and show him the true capabilities of the Buddhist monasteries. Monk Jian Kong nodded, and his gaze towards Mingzhan turned colder. Young monk, defeat him. Ji Chengtian, Little Fatty and the others were cheering for Mingzhan. Su Zimo said nothing. He was not worried about that battle. Mingzhan inherited the legacy of two super sects, Fahua and Daming monasteries. At the very least, nobody on the same level could compare to him in terms of their understanding of Buddhism and their capabilities from the Buddhist monasteries. On the stone platform, Monk Jian Kong did not hesitate and released his golden core phenomenon right away. Boom! In midair, a gigantic Buddhist pagoda descended slowly with a terrifying might. It gave off a bright brilliance as though it could suppress all evil. There were a total of 7 floors to the pagoda, and each of them was etched with dizzying Sanskrit words. The 7-floor pagoda? A pagoda was a Buddhist tower. In the Buddhist monasteries, the 7-floor pagoda was utmost. There were 3 levels to this legacy phenomenon of hollow monastery, the 3-floor, 5-floor, and the strongest 7-floor pagoda. Throughout history, only monks that possessed great wisdom in Buddhism could cultivate the 7-floor pagoda. Monk Jian Kong assumed a lotus position, and his hands shifted repeatedly to form seals. Streams of Buddha light, made with spirit energy, shot out from his fingertips and surged into the 7-floor pagoda. The 7-floor pagoda shone brightly. Amma Miyam. As the 7-floor pagoda descended, Buddhist proclamations sounded from within. It stirred one's mind such that they would want to prostrate and pay respects unconsciously. If that was the case for the cultivators watching in the vicinity, the pressure on Mingzhan was imaginable. Ba. Mingzhan had a calm expression and lowered his head slightly. He clasped his palms together before exclaiming a Buddhist proclamation softly. Behind him, a green lotus surfaced and blossomed softly with a bright Buddha light that seemed as though it could cleanse the world of all evil. The green lotus rose slowly and stopped the descent of the 7-floor pagoda. Creak, creak. While there was no earth-shaking explosion from the collision of the two great phenomenons of Buddhism, the entire stone platform creaked. While the 7-floor pagoda was strong, it could not do anything to that pure and flawless green lotus. Monk Jian Kong's eyes widened, and his features began to contort as he continued imbuing with spirit energy. Mingzhan's palms were clasped together as he chanted Buddhist sutras softly with a lowered head. It looked as though he was undergoing a normal day of cultivation at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Su Zimo said softly, Jian Kong lost. Jian Kong desired the win too badly. Because of that, his mental state became disadvantaged instead. However, Mingzhan maintained his normal composure. To compete or not to compete. One has no competitors if he does not compete. The difference between them was clear. Boom! There was a deafening sound. The 7-floor pagoda had already fallen, but the green lotus was still there. Monk Jian Kong collapsed onto the stone platform with a pale expression. Mingzhan rose and merely raised his head slightly to express a humble thanks before making his leave calmly. Chapter 741, Final Battle. Chapter 741, Final Battle. There were only 2 ranking battles remaining. The top 4 of the phenomenon ranking was going to be determined with the 2 battles. The next battle was between Run 2 of Azura Sect and Su Cheng of Zephyr Thunder Palace. The fight between them was even more intense. Both of them were almost representative of the peak of the Golden Core realm for the Immortal and Fiend sections. After 1,000 years, there was finally another cultivator from Azura Sect who managed to fuse Corpse Mountain and Blood Sea together and burst forth with a frightening might. At the same time, Su Cheng was also one of the few paragons in Zephyr Thunder Palace that managed to cultivate the apocalyptic 5 thunders. Both of them possessed a myriad of cultivation techniques and secret skills from the Tao of the immortals and fiends. Lightning flashed in a blinding manner, and the blood sea raged with a torrential blood stench on the stone platform. The power of thunder was the most effective counter against evil and fiends. However, Rintu's fiend techniques were way too terrifying, and there were at least thousands of vengeful souls circling him with a sinister aura. Even the power of thunder could not purge them completely. Both of them had met a strong foe. It was only after a grueling duel when they were both almost exhausted that Rintu stood out with a slight edge to claim victory. The end of that battle meant that the ranking of the new phenomenon ranking was almost entirely determined. There was only one last battle left. All eyes were on this. It was destined that among the two of them, one person was going to leave an unparalleled mark in history today. Qian opened his eyes with a deep gaze. As though he had fused into the universe, his aura became chaotic, ethereal, and unfathomable. He rested with his eyes closed throughout the entire ranking battle earlier on and was not bothered to watch. Be it Monk Jiankong, Mingzhen, Rintu, Su Cheng, or anyone else, their fights were not worthy of his time. It was only at that moment that Qian rose slowly. An ancient aura of a lord overlooking the world was exuded, and the cultivators present felt their hearts skip a beat. Even people the likes of Rintu and Su Cheng frowned at the sight of Qian at that moment as a feeling of uncontrollable defeat surged into their hearts. It was way too scary. Before he even attacked, the pressure he exerted on everyone in the vicinity was already this terrifying. Not many people have witnessed Qian fight ever since he obtained the top spot of the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago. That was because there were not many cultivators that were worthy of him fighting. To think that a monster incarnate would appear out of thin air 20 years ago and similar to him left a name on the ancient phenomenon stele that would last through eternity. Be careful. Lin Xuanji reminded with a voice transmission. I heard from seniors in my sect that he is not only terrifyingly talented, he is even blessed with great fortune. He managed to obtain a legacy of the Golden Core realm left behind by the human emperor in a ruin. It is said that this legacy of the Golden Core realm is complete and is superior to many secret skills, spirit arts, and even body-tempering techniques of Glass Palace and Overlord Palace. He is definitely not inferior to you in melee combat. Su Zimo nodded silently. Lin Xuanji was not wrong. They had a short melee combat exchange previously at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, resulting in broken bones and light injuries for the both of them. Up till this point of Su Zimo's cultivation, Qian was the only one who could defend and even undo a killing move of the mystic classic of the 12 Demon Kings of the Great Wilderness. However, that was 10 years ago. Su Zimo's golden core had not fully recovered 10 years ago. He was also not at the perfected stage for his inner core. For the past 10 years, he took in the spirit water at the backyard of the old temple continuously, and his body was refined further to a terrifying degree. After he entered the ancient battlefield, he obtained the refinement of the electric pool in the astral dragon sputum lair, and right now, his inner core was already at the perfected stage. Su Zimo believed that if he channeled his golden core and inner core at the same time and released his blood chi together, that amount of power was something that even Qian, who had obtained the legacy of the human emperor, would not be able to endure. Right then, Qian turned around slowly. He gazed at Su Zimo, who was not far away, and said slowly, I'll let you accomplish something. Among the paragons that leave their names on the ancient phenomenon stele, you will be the one that dies the fastest. Confidence. That confidence came from his 100 unrivaled years. A tremendous pressure gushed over. When it reached Su Zimo, it dissipated silently into emptiness. Su Zimo had a calm expression and replied indifferently, I have the same intentions as well. Qian smiled in disdain and flashed. Su Zimo leaped at almost the same time, and the two of them arrived on the stone platform. I'll make one thing clear beforehand. Suddenly, Perfected Lord Honey spoke. This phenomenon ranking belongs to the human race. I don't care if you're a demon or just someone who has cultivated demonic cultivation techniques. I forbid you from using any means available to demons. If you dare use any of them, I'll kill you personally. Perfected Lord Honey said the last sentence with a cold, murderous aura. Perfected Lord Yujun frowned slightly. With that, the battle became unfavorable for Su Zimo. How long could Su Zimo last in Di Yin's hands after his demonic capabilities? Perfected Lord Yujun wanted to speak, but stopped. Although he wanted to help, he could not refute Perfected Lord Hanyi's words. After all, this was a fight for the phenomenon ranking. If someone chose to compete for the phenomenon ranking using means of the demon race, it would definitely be somewhat inappropriate and incur objections. Su Zimo, if you disagree, we can forfeit this battle. Perfected Lord Yujun said deeply, the rewards for the second place of the phenomenon ranking are decent as well. Su Zimo could tell that Perfected Lord Yujun had his interests at heart. Perfected Lord Yujun was worried that half of Su Zimo's combat strength would be crippled without access to his demonic capabilities. He might be killed by Di Yin on the stone platform without a chance to even escape. Su Zimo, are you afraid? Are you thinking of running? Di Yin's eyes were filled with mockery. Escape? Su Zimo sneered and said slowly, I can still suppress you even without demonic capabilities. Well. Di Yin's eyes shone as he nodded. Let's see what you have to suppress me. Swash. No one saw how Di Yin exerted his strength, but in a flash, he appeared right in front of Su Zimo. They were dozens of feet apart, but he closed in instantly at an extremely fast speed. Splash! The sound of Di Yin's blood flow echoed from within his body like a raging tide. Tsunami blood. That was the highest realm of the power of bloodline. Even Shi Wuya of Glass Palace and Peng Yu of Overlord Palace, who specialized in body tempering, were not at that level. Swoosh! A gigantic fist flew out and expanded gradually. A torrential power crushed forward as though it could destroy all living things. The air current in the void was compressed to its limits and became incomparably scorching. They've begun. So fast. To think that it's a melee combat fight. A series of exclamations broke out from the crowd. All the cultivators knew that melee combat was the most dangerous. 4 paragons and monster incarnates of that level. A split second was all that was required to secure victory in a melee combat fight. A split second was the difference between life and death. All the cultivators present watched with widened eyes and did not dare to blink, afraid that they might miss out on anything in that brief moment. Little Fatty and the others tensed up subconsciously as well, with nervous expressions on their faces. They did not know whether Su Zimo could defend against the frighteningly powerful attacks of Di Yin without his demonic capabilities. Chapter 742, Great Chaos Essence Palm. Chapter 742, Great Chaos Essence Palm. Instinctively, Su Zimo wanted to release a killing move of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, Sanguine Ape Fruit Offering, when he was faced with the punch with a torrential might that resembled an emperor looking down on the world. This was his combat instinct. Combat instinct was for someone to make the right call and judgment through muscle memory. Although one might be in a blank state of mind at the moment of an enemy's attack, their bodies can react without thinking. At many times, it wasn't because someone could not see the attacks of their enemies. It was because it was too late by the time they thought about how to deal with the attack or dodge it. Their talent in melee combat relied entirely on their instincts. However, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly recalled that Sanguine Ape Fruit Offering was a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness and was considered as a technique of demons. At this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo had cultivated the killing moves in the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness to a point where he was mentally and physically harmonized with it in a mysterious manner. If the bystanders were to close their eyes, instead of Su Zimo, they would witness a sanguine ape demon king with a torrential blood stench and killing intent in their minds instead of Su Zimo. Perfected Lord Honey and the others would definitely attack him. That single thought caused Su Zimo to hesitate, and his aura was disadvantaged instantly. He did not have time to counterattack and could only defend passively. In that flustered moment, Su Zimo merely managed to prop his arms up. By then, Di Yin's fist had already descended. Bang! Their flesh and bones collided. Thud! Su Zimo's bloodline gushed and he staggered a step back. Up till this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo had been in many fights and overwhelmed countless strong foes. However, this was the first time that someone could knock him back in melee combat. He lost the initiative with a single distracted thought. A monster incarnate like Di Yin would definitely not let that opportunity slip. Di Yin strode forward and hurled his arms, smashing down like a steel whip violently on Su Zimo. The wind howled. Su Zimo had a calm expression that had no trace of panic. His bloodline surged with the sound of raging tides as his bones crackled. Swoosh! Su Zimo threw out a punch along Di Yin's arm. A ball of blinding light was released by that punch. 6 spirit patterns, a connate spirit weapon. A wave of shock and astonishment could be heard from the crowd. That connate spirit glove was obtained by Su Zimo from the Glass Palace cultivators he destroyed early on when he entered the ancient battlefield. No matter how strong or tough Di Yin's body or arm was, he could not withstand the impact of a connate spirit weapon. Di Yin's lips curled and a mocking look flashed through his eyes. Just as his arm was about to make contact with the connate spirit weapon, Di Yin changed tactics and spread his arms. His fist opened up and he slapped down on Su Zimo's head with his palm. Cripple! Di Yin roared with a murderous intent. Su Zimo's expression changed. There was a powerful mincing force from Di Yin's palm. It was like a gigantic mill that suppressed Su Zimo's fist at the bottom, swiveling, suppressing, and mincing continuously. In fact, the energy it gave off had already penetrated the surface of the glove and was acting on Su Zimo's fist directly. Su Zimo could clearly feel his fist and arm being pushed down by a gigantic mill, but he could not break free at all. Great Chaos Essence Palm. In the crowd below, Lin Xuanji murmured softly with a grim expression. The Great Chaos Essence Palm was a secret skill unique to Chaos Essence Sect and was extremely frightening. At its limit, a single palm strike was enough to split mountains. Cultivators that wore connate-grade defensive spirit weapons would appear fine on the surface. However, their organs would be ruptured into sludge, killing them completely. The Great Chaos Essence Palm ground through everything. Even a connate spirit energy could not withstand the grinding power of the Great Chaos Essence Palm. Thud! Su Zimo staggered another step back and shrugged his arm gently, secretly alarmed. If he had not released tidal might at the very last moment, his arm would have been crippled and he would have been severely injured after that exchange. Su Zimo had not procrastinated for the past few years after the Azura, Yin Beichen, imparted to him the tidal manual. There were a total of 9 levels to tidal might. Right now, Su Zimo was at level 3. Dean was even more alarmed. Under normal circumstances, there was no way Su Zimo would be able to defend the instant he changed tactics during their fight and released the Great Chaos Essence Palm. However, the moment they collided, 3 layers of power surged forth from Su Zimo's fist, resembling crushing tides. That power was the thing that dispersed the grinding power of his Great Chaos Essence Palm. There was no time for him to ponder deeper about that question during a fight. Now that Dean had the initiative and a tremendous aura, there was no way he was going to give up on his superior position as he charged forward once again. He extended his arm and crushed down on Su Zimo once more. Bang, bang, bang. The dull thuds of their collisions sounded repeatedly. Dean pushed in continuously. Su Zimo was forced back endlessly. Back at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, Dean revealed his frightening talent in melee combat and even managed to cancel out killing moves of the mystic classic of the 12 Demon Kings of the Great Wilderness in succession. Now that Su Zimo was unable to make use of his demonic techniques, his strength was significantly reduced, and he could not release many melee combat killing moves as well. He was hard-pressed to reverse the situation in that short period of time and was suppressed by Dean constantly. He could be killed at any moment. Sigh, the difference between them is too great. To think that Qian would suppress Su Zimo right from the start of the battle. Su Zimo is completely helpless. That's right, the only thing that remains is how long Su Zimo can survive. Although he has the title of the strongest monster incarnate in history, he is still inferior compared to Qian. Actually, the situation can be considered rather decent. The fact that Su Zimo is able to withstand so many attacks from Qian is already proof of his strength. The crowd discussed. Little Fatty and the others had grim, nervous expressions and their bodies were strung tensely, afraid that something might happen to Su Zimo. Relax. At the side, Lin Xuanji was extremely calm as he pointed to the two people on the stone platform. Take a good look. Although Zimo seems disadvantaged and has been on the retreat, there aren't any signs of his defeat. This still remains an extremely close fight. On the stone platform, Qian's flurry of attacks was getting faster and more intense. His agility was frighteningly fast as he flickered left and right. His palm technique was even more terrifying as hundreds of afterimages from his palm rained down from above in all directions, pushing towards Su Zimo. Su Zimo had a calm expression. Although he was on the retreat, the glint in his eyes merely intensified. Even without his demonic capabilities, he had many trump cards still. Pa! All of a sudden, a Sanskrit word boomed without warning. Su Zimo uttered Sanskrit and clasped his palms together. His forefingers made contact while his other four fingers intercrossed into a mysterious spirit seal. After he conjured that spirit seal, Su Zimo stopped retreating instantly. It was as though roots had grown beneath his feet that connected him with the stone platform. His body was unshakable like a mountain. Dean shuddered. His bloodline and spirit energy was interrupted by that Sanskrit word, and there was a momentary sluggishness. At the same time, his great chaos essence palm was slightly affected as well. Above the clouds, the expressions of several nascent souls from the Buddhist sects changed as they exclaimed, "Immovable foundation seal." Even Monk In Lu let out a beguiled expression as he muttered softly, "How is that possible?" Chapter 743, Trump Cards. Chapter 743, Trump Cards. The immovable foundation seal was a top-tier dermic seal from the Daming True Sutra of the Buddhist monasteries. However, the Daming True Sutra was lost along with the annihilation of Daming Monastery. To think the world-cleansing green lotus phenomenon of Fahua Monastery was not the only thing that reappeared during this phenomenon ranking. A lost dermic seal of Daming Monastery was here as well. Monk Yuan Kong, Monk Wei Fu, and a few other nascent souls of the Buddhist monasteries exchanged bright glances. The immovable foundation seal possessed an extremely frightening defensive capability when it was released together with the Daming mantra, rooting a foundation to the ground like an immovable mountain. When Qian's great chaos essence palm landed on Su Zimo, streams of divinely Buddha light were triggered and a tremendous amount of energy was reflected. Su Zimo did not budge at all. As for Qian, his torrential flurry of attacks paused momentarily. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and his lips moved as he uttered another Sanskrit word. Ma! The Sanskrit rang throughout the world. At the same time, he reached out with his palm and another Buddhist dermic seal was formed as spirit energy gushed. A bright golden palm appeared in midair with outstretched fingers, resembling a jail that moved to imprison Qian. It was one of the Daming dermic seals, Immortal Trap Seal. Even immortals could be trapped by that dermic seal. Su Zimo managed to stabilize the situation with the immovable foundation seal and counterattacked for the first time. Qian was expressionless and the muscles on his ears twitched, causing them to close sinisterly in the direction of his cheeks. The sound of the outside world was entirely blocked off. With that, the power of the Daming mantra decreased significantly right away. Annihilation Sword Qi. Against the incoming gigantic golden palm of the immortal trap seal, Qian let out a long howl and his fingers shuffled to create a hand seal, causing a gray, hazy stream of sword qi to burst forth from his fingertip. The sword qi streaked through the air and devoured the life and spirit qi in the voids completely. That's a secret skill of the human emperor. As the current generation's legacy disciple of Enigma Palace, Lin Xuanji was knowledgeable and recognized the background of that sword chi right away. Di has indeed obtained the legacy of the human emperor. Sizzle. A jarring sound was released as the sword chi glided across the golden palm. Instantly, a gray scar appeared in the middle of the palm. Boom! The golden palm was sliced into 2 parts by that sword chi. Is that all you've got? Di sneered. Before his laughter stopped, he was overwhelmed by the deafening sounds of sword chi blanketing the air. Clang! Clang! Streams of sword chi streaked one after another through the void in a blinding manner. There were 27 flying swords, and all of them were at supreme grade. Furthermore, each individual sword shone with blinding lightning with electric currents that coiled around them in an extraordinary manner. The flying swords followed a unique trajectory and left scars in midair, rapidly forming an extremely sharp formation. Ah, to think that it's a sword formation. Who would have expected that Su Zimo had that up his sleeves? In the crowd, the paragon of ancient array sect gazed at the stone platform, frowning in deep thoughts. Although the gleam from the sword formation was so frightening, he could not identify its origin. Have a taste of my capabilities as well. Su Zimo shouted and controlled the level 3 illumination sword formation, engulfing it over Di. Sword chi buzzed and swiveled endlessly in midair like a blazing sun. It gave off a destructive aura as though it could rip everything apart. Ma. Sanskrit sounded once more. Both Su Zimo's hands shuffled to form different spirit seals, and his golden core spun. Spirit energy gushed, forming a halo with a saintly glow behind his head. The Fiend Suppression Seal and Demon Subduing Seal. 2 other Daming Dermic Seals appeared at the same time. 2 gigantic golden palms surfaced and crushed Di from 2 different directions. It was not over yet. After he released the 2 Dermic Seals of the Buddhist monasteries, Su Zimo channeled a mental technique and gestured as though he was hugging a ball in the air in front of him. A flare burst forth in his palms, and a fireball was gathered. Go! Su Zimo pointed forward. The humongous fireball bolted forward, and the temperature in the void climbed rapidly. While it was in midair, the fireball suddenly exploded into dozens of fist-sized fireballs, raining down like a fire rain of a spewing volcano. Instant thunder. Dark clouds lined up above Di Yin's head and spun continuously, forming a gigantic, pitch-black vortex. Lightning flashed, thunder crackled, and the entire world spun. A thunderbolt thicker than a water bucket struck down ferociously towards Di. Shocking, horrifying, incomparable. At that moment, more than 100,000 cultivators beneath the stone platform and the 17 nascent souls were dumbstruck with shock in their eyes. Nobody expected Su Zimo's counterattack to be this domineering, sharp, ferocious, and suffocating. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo released multiple spirit arts and secret skills. Apart from the sword formation, there were even lost secret skills of the Buddhist monasteries, fire spirit arts and thunder spirit arts that Zephyr Thunder Palace specialized in. Ren Tu, Su Cheng, and everyone else watched with widened eyes. If they had to face such a terrifying attack, they would only be able to escape if they released their golden core phenomenon. Di narrowed his eyes without a trace of panic in them. Slash. He controlled Annihilation Sword Chi and struck the core of Illumination Sword Formation. That was the brightest spot of the sword formation and also its weakest point. Instantly, Illumination Sword Formation shattered. Annihilation Sword Chi dimmed lifelessly and dissipated from the world as well. Mountain Support Technique. Dean shuffled his hands rapidly and conjured a spirit art, creating 2 spirit mountains that towered into the clouds in front of him that shielded him from the 2 dermic seals of the Buddhist monasteries. Bang! Bang! The 2 dermic seals collided against the spirit mountains and let out deafening explosions. Extinguish! Dean opened his mouth and a terrifying air current transformed into a cyclone in midair, extinguishing the incoming fireballs. Pissed! All the cultivators gasped when they saw that. This was beyond the scope of spirit arts and secret skills. Even if everyone present had the method of cultivating that secret skill, none of them would be able to do it. It required an extremely powerful lung. Without the support of an immensely strong bloodline and organs, one's lungs would explode if they released that secret skill. The only thing that troubled Qian was instant thunder. It was too fast. Qian did not have time to conjure a spirit art and secret skill to defend against it. He raised his head. His pupils constricted swiftly like a round moon that was being devoured, leaving nothing but a pair of crescent moons surrounded by a milky white shade. His visual technique, Eclipse Eye. 2 cold beams shone in Qian's eyes. Right in front of everyone, the thick thunderbolt that descended from midair was sliced apart by the 2 cold beams, turning into pieces that sizzled wildly. That was the power of visual techniques. A frightening burst of killing power could be released with just a pair of eyes. Qian released secret skills in succession and defended the entirety of Su Zimo's frightening attack. For the cultivators watching below, it felt as though the world had opened up. Well. Qian nodded repeatedly with a cold gaze that did not conceal his killing intent and shouted, "There has never been a cultivator who could force me to use my spirit weapon in 100 years. You're the first." Chapter 744, Great Qian Imperial Seal. Chapter 744, Great Qian Imperial Seal. For 100 years, Qian's palms were enough to suppress everyone of the same cultivation realm. In fact, his palms could snap and crush supreme-grade spirit weapons with ease. Even perfect spirit weapons could barely hurt him. If any cultivator brought out a connate spirit weapon, he could avoid it with his many combat skills and kill his opponent. But now, against Su Zimo's ferocious attacks, Qian could not hold it in any longer. He slapped his storage bag, and an imperial seal appeared in his palm. It looked extraordinary, and a glow swiveled around it. "Go!" He pushed forward, and the imperial seal flew from his hand. It expanded rapidly in midair like a gigantic mountain and gave off an extremely frightening might that conquered everything around it. A sentence was etched beneath the imperial seal. "The emperor shall live a long and prosperous life with the mandate of the heavens." Ah! That looks like the heirloom imperial seal of the Great Qian Empire. There's no mistake. That's it. To think that this treasure would end up in Qian's hands after the destruction of the Great Qian Empire. There's no doubt that this man is born to be an emperor and possess great fortune. The heirloom imperial seal was made from a natural jade rock that absorbed the spirit qi of heaven and earth and the essence of the sun and moon. There were 6 spirit patterns on the surface of the jade rock by nature. Later on, a weapon refinement grandmaster gave it a light touch-up and it became the heirloom imperial seal. Legend has it that the imperial seal was kept in the palace of the Great Qian Empire to undergo the baptism of dragon vein qi. The emperor of Great Qian carried it wherever he went, and as time went by, the might of an emperor was nurtured in the imperial seal. Although the imperial seal was made from a piece of jade, it was extremely tough and could snap metal and suppress all living beings. This was a true weapon that supported a nation. Back when the Great Qian Empire was destroyed and the 4 vassal states of each direction rose, flames of war raged on everywhere. Every single vassal state wanted to get their hands on this heirloom imperial seal of the Great Qian Empire. It was even said that whoever possessed the heirloom imperial seal could rebuild a new domineering empire to rule through history. Even now, when the North region is split into 4, for the past 10,000 years, the Great Zhou, Great Shang, Great Xia, and Great Yu dynasties never gave up on their search for the heirloom imperial seal. Unfortunately, it was all to no avail. To think that the Great Qian imperial seal would be in Qian's hands. "Kneel!" Qian shouted with a bright gaze. The Great Qian imperial seal descended slowly, and a massive empire was conjured around the imperial seal. It crushed down with the might that could support an entire nation. Su Zimo was expressionless and slapped his storage bag, causing a gigantic seal to appear in his palms. His seal was squarish and golden with a divine dragon coiling above it in a lifelike manner. This is, above the clouds, the expressions of many nascent souls changed as they could not help but turn towards the aura given off by the gigantic seal. Dean frowned slightly. Even in the battlefield, he could clearly sense the power contained by the gigantic golden seal. That power had not been released just yet. However, there was a probability that it was not inferior to the Great Qian Imperial seal once it was released. What was that thing that had the power to contend against the Great Qian Imperial seal? That should be a treasure in the human emperor's palace. Although Lin Xuanji had not seen the coiling dragon seal before, he could roughly guess where it was from. There was truly nothing much that could compare to the Great Qian Imperial seal in terms of might. A treasure of the human emperor was definitely one of them. No matter what, the owner of the Great Qian Imperial seal was merely the emperor of Great Qian. However, the owner of the coiling dragon seal was the legendary human emperor. You want me to kneel? Su Zimo sneered and propped up the coiling dragon seal, injecting spirit energy into it. Whoosh! 6 spirit lights shone in a bedazzling manner. The divine dragon that was initially coiled above the seal seemed to have awoken as it opened its eyes suddenly. It gave off a shuddering aura that seemed as though it could crush the voids and suppress all living beings. Roar! A dragon roar sounded. The coiling dragon seal flew from his hand and turned into a golden streak of light, smashing violently into the Great Qian Imperial seal. Boom! There was a deafening sound. Streaks of resplendent lights could be seen from the collision point. Golden light spilled everywhere as a dragon danced in the air. The Great Qian Imperial seal was suppressed and trembled endlessly by the coiling dragon seal. The glow around the jade dimmed significantly. However, the Great Qian Imperial seal was a Khanate spirit weapon after all. Although the coiling dragon seal was strong, it could not suppress the former within a short period of time. The killing intent in Di Yin's eyes deepened after his moves were cancelled by Su Zimo one after another. He swiped his storage bag and withdrew 2 cold truncheons that were made of mystical metal. That's the weapon that Di Yin used 100 years ago. It's a Khanate spirit weapon called the Extreme Frost Truncheons. Lin Xuanji said deeply, a mighty figure of chaos essence sect headed to the depths of the North Pole personally to retrieve the frost ores. He had a weapon refinement grandmaster of 100 refinement sect refine them into the truncheons. 4 foot in length and 10,000 pounds in weight, it can split mountains. Demonis G nodded as well. In the ancient battlefield 100 years ago, countless weapons were destroyed by the pair of extreme frost truncheons. There were many paragons that died to them as well. Kill! In a flash, Di Yin charged before Su Zimo wielding the extreme frost truncheons in his hands. Swash! A frost wave descended from midair. The air in the surroundings froze almost instantly. Against the shroud of the extreme frost truncheons, Su Zimo could clearly sense his bloodline and spirit energy churning with a tinge of sluggishness. Su Zimo was secretly shocked. Even he was affected given his physique, bloodline, and the quality of his golden core. If it was anybody else, their spirit energy and bloodline would freeze up the moment they made contact with the truncheons. Su Zimo channeled his bloodline, and the sound of a tsunami surged from within his body. His golden core spun wildly. He swiped his storage bag, and blood quencher appeared in his hands. Countercurrent. Swoosh. The sound of a raging tide burst forth as a blood beam shone brightly and surged in reverse. Su Zimo did not retreat at all against Di Yin's attack. Instead, he made a powerful counterattack and released countercurrent from the sea calming manual. When he released his saber technique, it was as though waters from the sea had appeared in a massive manner. The frost from the extreme frost truncheons could freeze rivers and lakes, but it could not freeze a boundless ocean. Tsunami blood. Spirit energy was released relentlessly with a tidal might. His saber force resembled an ocean. The extreme frost truncheons could not freeze his bloodline, spirit energy, or saber technique. Clang! Blood quencher collided violently against the extreme frost truncheons. Crack! 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 A layer of frost appeared on blood quencher's blade and spread towards Su Zimo's palm that was on the handle. I'll destroy it even if it's a Khanate spirit weapon. Dean smirked with a cold gaze. Not necessarily. Su Zimo was expressionless as he swiped his palm gently across the saber's blade. A streak of fresh blood splashed onto the blade. It was scorching hot. Buzz. As though it was triggered, Blood Quencher suddenly became excited. It quivered and buzzed endlessly as its blood beam expanded and stripped away the frost on its blade. The reason why Blood Quencher was able to evolve to become a Khanate spirit weapon was because it was soaked and refined in the blood of countless experts in the backyard of the old temple at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Blood Quencher was a ferocious weapon. It was extremely bloodthirsty. The stronger the bloodline, the more excited it was. Now that it tasted Su Zimo's blood, it instantly released a terrifying power. Blood chi emanated and managed to envelope the extreme frost truncheons. The extreme frost truncheons could not even freeze that blood chi. However, that was merely the start of Su Zimo's counterattack. Chapter 745, Chaos Ocean. Chapter 745, Chaos Ocean. A blood beam exploded from Blood Quencher, and it let out a torrential ferocity after consuming Su Zimo's blood. Su Zimo pushed forward, and his saber force transformed after the steely tough countercurrent. Blood Quencher moved in from a tricky angle and stabbed below Di Yin's ribs. At the same time, Di Yin felt his vision blur. A fiendish phantom shifted and the shuddering sounds of ghosts wailing sounded beside his ears. Azura Saber. The saber technique that supported Azura Sect. Most of the cultivators present were paragons of their respective sects and recognized the origin of that saber technique right away. Is that even real, or is it just resembling the form of Azura Saber? Resembling the form? How can it be fake when the saber force of Azura Saber was already out? He has clearly obtained the legacy of Azura Saber. Rintu's expression was terrible. Although he was a paragon of Azura Sect and even managed to fuse Corpse Mountain and Blood Sea, his cultivation of Azura Saber was not at that level. In other words, it meant that Azura Saber was even stronger in Su Zimo's hands than it was in his. The nascent soul of Azura Sect knitted his brows tightly. Azura Saber was the saber technique that was used to support Azura Sect and would never be imparted to outsiders. Where did Su Zimo learn it from? Furthermore, by the looks of it, it was clear that he had truly obtained its legacy. Azura Sect sure is generous to impart Azura Saber to an outsider. Perfected Lord Hun Yi glared at the Perfected Lord of Azura Sect and said coldly, "Hee." Perfected Lord Tian Ming of Zephyr Thunder Palace gave an odd chuckle. We don't even know if he's a human just yet. If he turns out to be a demon, Azura Sect will definitely be the enemy of everyone in the world for colluding with demons. To hell with you. The Perfected Lord of Azura Sect was already frustrated when he saw that his sect's secret skill was leaked. When he heard those people from the immortal sects try and pin the blame on him, he could not help but lash out at them. We can talk about this in the future. Everyone, let us just watch the battle. Perfected Lord Yujun finally spoke and interrupted the argument between the few nascent souls. The tides on the battlefield were slowly shifting. After Blood Quencher, Su Zimo released two top-tier saber techniques, Azura Saber and the Sea Calming Manual, perfectly. There was no sign of conflict between the two saber techniques of the distinctly different Immortal and Fiend Das. One moment, it was righteous raging tides that surged forward with a steely intent. The next moment, there were chilling white bones from hell that gave off a sinister aura. His movements were natural and filled with imagination. Although Su Zimo could not use his demonic capabilities, he had two top-tier saber techniques of the Immortal and Fiend Das. No other cultivator in the same realm could compare against him in saber mastery. Coupled with a killing weapon like Blood Quencher, his strength was even more frightening. Su Zimo released his saber force and pushed forward, suppressing Di Yin completely. Di Yin could only defend passively. Furthermore, he looked like he was in a pathetic state as he defended desperately. With his extreme frost truncheons, Di Yin's physique and power of bloodline was definitely not inferior to Su Zimo. However, he was drowned by corpse mountain blood sea, azure white bones and malevolent ghosts all around him. The deafening sound of a tsunami echoed around him and rattled his mind. That saber technique was enough to shake the mind of a cultivator. If it was a cultivator with a weak resolve, he would definitely reveal an opening and be slashed down by Su Zimo. Dean retreated continuously and his eclipse eye shimmered darkly. He kept a clear mind and swung both truncheons to create ice walls around him. Cling, clang. The sound of metal clashing rang incessantly and sparks flew as Blood Quencher collided against the extreme frost truncheons. The two monster incarnates were in an earth-shaking battle on the stone platform. The spirit arts, secret skills, and countless combat skills released by the two of them during the fight broadened the perspective of the cultivators watching below, and they benefited immensely. Little Fatty and the others watched fixedly with tense expressions, nervous the entire time. Although Su Zimo was in the lead right now, the outcome was still not determined. This was not the limit to Di Yin's strength and terror. To think that Su Zimo could actually push Di Yin to such a state. By the looks of things, he might truly be able to overpower Di Yin. He will break down the legend and become the top of the phenomenon ranking as the new #1 perfected being. On the stone platform, the frequency of Su Zimo's attacks increased as he tightened his saber force and restricted Di Yin's available space continuously. Di Yin's eyes were fuming with a repressed rage. Initially, he thought that he would be able to suppress Su Zimo with ease. To think that he would be forced to such a state by the latter. Di Yin roared into the skies and released a shuddering aura. The void around him quaked and the stone platform creaked loudly. Against the suppression of the aura, Su Zimo's initial relentless saber force dissipated. It could not defend against the aura. Cries of surprises came from the crowd. Many cultivators felt goosebumps on their bodies. It was a golden core phenomenon. That was the aura of a golden core phenomenon. The legendary phenomenon of the human emperor was finally going to reappear. An ocean appeared behind Di Yin, riding above darkness and light. It was chaotic, dusky, and rumbled intensely. Light, darkness, wind, fire, or thunder that approached the ocean were all devoured by it completely and vanished. Dimensional space was not existent in that chaotic ocean. Time seemed to be mixed up in that chaotic ocean. The human emperor's phenomenon, Chaos Ocean. Many cultivators found themselves drawn into Chaos Ocean mentally after looking at it for a prolonged period. All of them lost their consciousness and had lost expressions. Thump. A cultivator fell forward stiffly devoid of any life within him. He was dead. Chaos Ocean unified heaven and earth and could devour everything in the world, turning them into chaos. Be careful, don't look at it for too long. Lin Xuanji knew how terrifying that phenomenon was and warned Little Fatty and the others hurriedly. If that was the case for the cultivators below, it was difficult to imagine the pressure that was mounted on Su Zimo when he was right in the middle of the battlefield directly in front of Chaos Ocean. Blood Quencher could not push forward against Chaos Ocean, as though it sank into a swamp. Its initial fervent and buzzing blade went still instantly. Gradually, the 6 spirit lights on the saber dimmed as well. Su Zimo took a deep breath and his pupils constricted sharply. How scary. If Blood Quencher was tossed into Chaos Ocean, it won't be long before that connate spirit weapon was damaged severely and it might even become irreparable. That was the phenomenon of the human emperor that dominated throughout history. In the face of Chaos Ocean, Su Zimo felt waves of suffocation as his essence, blood, spirit energy, and even life force and soul were being yanked forcefully from his body. In that brief moment of contact, Su Zimo felt his lifespan drain significantly. Di Yin's eyes shone with a faint look of mockery as he raised his arm and pointed forward. The Chaos Ocean behind him moved forward and engulfed Su Zimo. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. If he was devoured by that ocean that could even cripple connate spirit weapons, he would die for sure. Chapter 746, New Climax. Chapter 746, New Climax. How should one defend against such a frightening golden core phenomenon? The moment Chaos Ocean rose, The other 8 monster incarnates in the top 10 of the phenomenon ranking felt a sense of helplessness surge in their hearts. It was especially so for Ren Tu, Su Cheng, Monk Jiankong, and the others. Initially, they wanted to overthrow Dian during the phenomenon ranking this time round. It was only at this moment that they realized the immense difference between them and Dian. That phenomenon is clearly much stronger than it was 100 years ago. Seems like Dian did not waste his time suppressing his cultivation for the past 100 years. Instead, he has gained an even deeper understanding towards Chaos Ocean. I've got to extend my congratulations to Chaos Essence Sect, Monk Yuan Kong said. Without a doubt, Dian will definitely be at the top of the phenomenon ranking this time round. Once he advances to the nascent soul realm, Chaos Essence Sect will gain another perfected lord. Given Dian's strength, it was almost certain that he would sweep through everyone of the same level and dominate Tianhuang mainland. Once he advances to the nascent soul realm, perfected Lord Luo Shui had a grim expression. Even before Dian was at nascent soul realm, the power of his Chaos Ocean was already at the level of a nascent soul. There was a high chance that any ordinary nascent soul would be killed mercilessly if they fought against Dian. What a frightening person! Perfected Lord Luo Shui lamented internally, and a hint of worry flashed through her eyes as she looked at the green figure fighting against Dian on the stone platform. Perfected Lord Yu Jun shook his head gently as well. The moment Dian released Chaos Ocean, it was clear to all the nascent souls present that the outcome of the battle was already determined. The only thing that they did not know was whether Su Zimo could survive. That lad was lauded as the strongest monster incarnate in history, had cultivated to the extreme foundation establishment realm, and was said to be the second human emperor. All his titles were hard-earned from battle after battle without mistake. There was a chance he might have a trump card to help him survive this. Beneath the stone platform. What should we do? Little Fox looked at Lin Xuanji anxiously. Her watery, foxy eyes did not blink as she whispered, "Will Enigma Palace really not step in to save him if he's in danger?" Lin Xuanji laughed bitterly. Enigma Palace has never sided with any party and will definitely not interfere for personal reasons in a battle of this level. However, as long as Su Zimo can leave the radius of the stone platform in time, Dian won't be able to hunt him down. Monkey reared his head slightly with a prideful expression as he watched the battlefield in silence. He would definitely step in if Su Zimo was in danger. There were no rules in his heart. At the most, he would just fight the world even if it stood against him. On the stone platform, a shadow enveloped the place. Su Zimo did not dare to hesitate when he sensed the horrifying aura of Chaos Ocean. He let out a long roar and his golden core spun as phenomenons appeared behind him. Bang! Boom! Boom! The firmaments collapsed and lightning flashed with raging flood currents. The primordial divine turtle had descended. Crack! 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 The mountains cracked and volcanoes spewed with flowing lava. The primordial soaring serpent had descended. Su Zimo released both his primordial phenomenons at the same time in order to deal with Chaos Ocean. However, in the face of Chaos Ocean, the two primordial phenomenons shuddered the moment they appeared. The divine turtle cried tragically while the soaring serpent hissed as though they were under tremendous pressure. Not good. Lin Xuanji exclaimed internally when he saw that. Ugh! Perfected Lord Yu Jun sighed. If Su Zimo chose to retreat the moment Dian released Chaos Ocean and darted outside the perimeter of the phenomenon, he might have had a shot at survival. But now? Perfected Lord Yu Jun lamented internally. What a pity that a monster incarnate of the human race is going to die just like this. Ha 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 ha. Above the clouds, Perfected Lord Han Yi's eyes were filled with mockery as he reared his head in wild laughter. He truly doesn't know his limits. To think that he would want to try and fight against Chaos Ocean. Dian waved his arm and Chaos Ocean rumbled forward furiously, drowning the two phenomenons of the divine turtle and soaring serpent instantly. The two divine beings struggled continuously within Chaos Ocean, but they could not break free and sank deeper instead. The luster on the two primordial phenomenons dimmed rapidly as though they could dissipate at any moment. How dare the light of a firefly try to compete against the shine of the moon for glory? Dean looked down like an unparalleled lord as he declared proudly, "Extreme Foundation Establishment Realm? Double phenomenon? After today, they will be nothing but mere jokes." Suzimo has sunk into Chaos Ocean and can't get out. He will die the moment his two phenomenons shatter. Judging the way things are going, he's not going to last long. The crowd discussed. Monkey gripped his fists tightly, and his eyes shone with a scarlet blood glint. His fur stood on end, and the demonic chi that exuded from his nose and mouth turned thicker and thicker. However, although he was within Chaos Ocean, Suzimo's eyes did not contain the panic and fear that everyone imagined. Instead, they were still as water. Fuse. Suzimo's golden core spun with its full strength as he closed his palms slowly before his chest. As he did that, the two great phenomenons behind him merged slowly and finally fused together. One was fire while the other was water. One was passive while the other was active. The two primordial divine beings were fused as one perfectly. The serpent and turtle were entwined, and the black tortoise had descended. A shuddering aura spread forth, affecting all the spirit beasts, spirit demons reared by the cultivators present, no matter their bloodlines or endowments. The moment the phantom of that gigantic black tortoise appeared, all of them felt chills and the urge to kneel down to it. It was a pressure that came from the depths of their souls and bloodlines. The black tortoise was one of the 4 sacred beasts and was the progenitor of many demon beasts and living beings. The 17 nascent souls present were surprised as well. What a frightening aura. To think that this trump card up his sleeves. The power of that phenomenon has already surpassed the golden core realm and is at the nascent soul realm. The nascent souls present exchanged glances, shocked internally. What did that mean? It meant that both golden cores dueling on the stone platform possessed the power to slaughter through a major cultivation realm. They were able to kill nascent souls. A wave of shock and astonishment could be heard from the crowd. Nobody expected the outcome that was initially set to reach a new climax once more. Above the gloomy, chaotic ocean surface, a gigantic demon beast floated. Its back was inscribed with extremely mysterious runes, as though they possessed the secrets of the universe. The black tortoise reared its head and glided through the ocean with its limbs. It could not sink further. Even Chaos Ocean could not drown that sacred beast. Legend has it that the 4 sacred beasts were born from the chaos that existed before the world was formed. How could water drown a fish? Suzimo stood on the back of the black tortoise with his hands behind his back. His green robes fluttered and his black hair danced as he looked forward with a deep, domineering gaze. His figure stood on the black tortoise, as though that sacred beast was tamed and merely existed to serve his purpose. The scene was so shocking that it was etched into the hearts of every cultivator present. Dean narrowed his gaze as his golden core spun wildly. A series of waves raged within Chaos Ocean. The waters in the ocean were far from ordinary. Although they looked unassuming, every single splash was enough to kill any golden core present. The black tortoise glided with its full might against the current, and its back shone with mysterious lights that repelled the incoming splashes of the ocean away from it. Its massive body bobbed up and down in the raging tides. A figure stood on its back the entire time in an unyielding manner. The two of them were now in a stalemate. It did not seem realistic for Chaos Ocean to drown the black tortoise within a short period of time. However, it was absolutely impossible for the black tortoise to get out of Chaos Ocean's zone as well. Chapter 747, True Trump Card. Chapter 747, True Trump Card. 2 figures stood in a stalemate on the stone platform. 2 glorious golden core phenomenons clashed repeatedly, letting out blinding lights. Deafening roars echoed everywhere. The surrounding spirit energy had already been sucked dry completely by the 2 great phenomenons. The sacred beast, the black tortoise. To think that he created a brand new golden core phenomenon that can stand against the human emperor's phenomenon. This alone is something that will make its mark in the history of the cultivation world. By the looks of it, everything is going to boil down to the endurance of their blood chi, stamina, and spirit energy. On the stone platform, the two of them were in a stiff face-off. Neither of them dared to relax. If Su Zimo's spirit energy was insufficient, Chaos Ocean would drown the black tortoise instantly and drag him into the depths of the waters, ending his life. If Dian's spirit energy was weak, the black tortoise would also tear through Chaos Ocean and ram him to death. Both their golden cores spun furiously and injected spirit energy continuously. The two great golden core phenomenons collided even more intensely. The stone platform that was made from limestone quaked and creaked violently before collapsing right in front of everyone. The collision of the two great phenomenons destroyed the entire stone platform. Sand and rocks flew as dust billowed. The crowd was in chaos as all the cultivators scattered in retreat. If they were drawn in by the two phenomenons, even paragons like Rin Tu and Su Cheng would explode in a blood mist instantly. Above the clouds, Perfected Lord Yujun rose and said deeply, "Everyone, both of them are extremely rare paragons for the human race. The death of either of them will definitely be an immense loss for our race. The two of them have fought to the point where even the stone platform shattered. Let's call it a draw." Monk In Lu clasped his palms together and nodded. "Excellent." Perfected Lord Luo Shuet nodded as well. "I agree." "Draw?" Perfected Lord Honey sneered. "You June, as a cultivator of Enigma Palace, don't you claim to be impartial and righteous? This fight has yet to end, and you're talking about a draw? What a joke." "Honey, understand that my suggestion has no bias in it." Perfected Lord Yujun said deeply, "At this point, nobody knows the outcome of the battle. It's just a matter of their stamina and intensity of spirit energy. If things drag on, Dean might not necessarily win as well." "That's right. I'm sure even Chaos Essence Sect doesn't wish to end up with an internecine outcome," Perfected Lord Luo Shui said coldly. "Ha ha ha ha." As though he had heard the greatest joke in the world, Perfected Lord Honey shouted, "Internecine outcome? This has to be the greatest joke in the world. This unknown lad that popped out of nowhere really thinks that he's worthy of being compared to the legacy disciple of Chaos Essence Sect? I say it's a good thing that the stone platform is shattered." Perfected Lord Honey stood up as well and declared coldly with a murderous aura, "With that, there's no longer a restriction of area. That lad won't be able to escape even if he wants to, and they can fight to their deaths." Perfected Lord Yujun's eyelids twitched when he heard that. Perfected Lord Honey said that with absolute confidence towards Dian. Rather than blind faith, it seemed as though the latter had something else to rely on. Could Dian have another trump card up his sleeves? The thought of that possibility gave Perfected Lord Yujun chills down his spine. The eyes of the other 16 nascent souls shone. Naturally, they understood what Perfected Lord Honey was implying as well. Monk Yuan Kong asked with a fake smile, "Fellow Taoist Honey, could it be that Dian has something that we've yet to see?" "Hee hee." Perfected Lord Honey laughed without answering directly. Instead, he said indifferently, "The cultivators present today sure are fortunate to be able to witness the birth of a monster incarnate that can stand shoulder to shoulder. No, he might even be able to surpass the human emperor. Fight to their deaths." That was a remarkable appraisal. Shoulder to shoulder, or even surpass the human emperor. It was impossible for him to spout that in jest. In fact, he can't even mention that in jest. He was definitely backed by something. All the cultivators present, Perfected Lord Yujun included, were shocked. Right then, the dust and smoke of the stone platform ruins dispersed and two figures emerged once more. They were still in a stiff stalemate. Su Zimo stood on the black tortoise with a calm expression. Di Yin's eyes carried the hint of mockery still as he smirked, glaring at Su Zimo haughtily as though he was far superior. Finally, Di Yin spoke. "Su Zimo, do you know why I said that the peak of the myriad phenomenon peak would be your death's gate?" The cultivators beneath were immensely shocked. None of them could imagine Diyin to have excess strength such that he could afford the distraction to speak despite the intense clash. Diyin continued, "Do you know why I've never deemed you as somebody worthy?" Su Zimo did not reply and merely looked at Diyin in silence. Diyin raised his head slightly with a proud expression and replied himself, "That's because the difference between us is way too great. This is a difference that you can't even sense." "What nonsense is that asshole spouting?" Monkey grit his teeth and his eyes shone with a scarlet flash. Little Fatty and the others shook their heads. All the other cultivators were confused as well. "You don't even know what trump cards I have up my sleeves." Dean smiled gently as he spoke, seemingly to himself, "I've never released this trump card before because it was initially meant for killing nascent souls. You sure are lucky to be the first person to die to my trump card." The crowd went dead silent. Everyone's eyes were filled with endless shock. Dean had something else up his sleeves. In fact, his move could even kill nascent souls who were a major cultivation realm above him. Instantly, sweat poured down from Little Fatty's forehead as he murmured repeatedly, "What should we do? What should we do?" On the other hand, Lin Xuanji was instead not as nervous as he was earlier on. He merely gazed at Su Zimo with a slight frown and muttered, "Strange." Even he who was outside of the fight was shocked when he heard Diyin's statement. However, Su Zimo, who was directly involved in the fight, was extremely calm and did not seem surprised. Diyin glared at Su Zimo, who was not far away, and smiled gently. He extended his palm slowly and raised his brows. "Su Zimo, take a look. What is this?" Instantly, everyone's gaze turned to Diyin's palm. In the center of his palm, a small green lotus gradually blossomed. It was pristine as jade and gave off a mysterious glow, as though it could cleanse everything in the world. "Ah, could it be? That looks like the Buddhist monasteries." A series of exclamations broke out from the crowd, but none of them dared to continue. Above the clouds, the 17 nascent souls were shocked when they saw it. Their scalps prickled and all their hairs stood on end. Monk Yuan Kong's eyes widened with disbelief as he exclaimed, "World-cleansing green lotus." An uproar broke out the moment he mentioned those 4 words. Diyin's voice sounded calmly, "Do you think that you're the only one with a double phenomenon?" Everyone turned silent. All the cultivators felt as though they were choked by a pair of invisible hands, as though a frightening aura suppressed them to a suffocating point where they could not breathe. Chapter 748, Chaos Green Lotus. Chapter 748, Chaos Green Lotus. When they saw the green lotus in Diyin's hands, the eyes of many cultivators were filled with shock, disbelief, awe and pity towards Su Zimo. The fight was over the moment Diyin brought out the green lotus. Even Su Zimo's greatest glory could not compete against Diyin. He had a double phenomenon. So did Diyin. Furthermore, the 2 golden core peaks were almost representative of the epitome of the immortal and Buddhist Das. All phenomenons in the world had to bow down when those 2 great phenomenons were brought out. Diyin truly is someone with immense fortune. Not only did he obtain the human emperor's legacy, he even obtained the legacy of the Buddhist monasteries. If not for Diyin, Su Zimo would indeed be worthy of his title as the strongest monster incarnate in history. Unfortunately, his greatest tragedy is being born in the same era and becoming enemies with Diyin. Many cultivators discussed in hushed whispers. Little Fatty and the others were extremely anxious and had darkened expressions. Right now, the face-off between Chaos Ocean and the Black Tortoise phenomenon was a stalemate. Diyin had Su Zimo completely suppress the moment he brought out the world-cleansing green lotus. Ming Zhan opened his mouth slightly with a conflicted expression. Among all the cultivators present, he was probably the only one who knew how Diyin cultivated the world-cleansing green lotus. Back in the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, he was the one who handed Diyin the mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra personally. However, Ming Zhan truly had not expected Diyin to comprehend its obscurities within a single month and cultivate that phenomenon of the Buddhist monasteries. What was a monster incarnate? He was an example of one. On the battlefield, Su Zimo stood on the black tortoise and looked at the green lotus on Di Yin's palm. However, his eyes merely flickered slightly without the fear and panic that everyone imagined he would possess. It was as though he was frightened stiff. Di Yin could not help but frown when he looked at Su Zimo opposite him. Su Zimo appeared way too calm. He felt disappointed when the shock and fear he anticipated was not present. Foo-foo. Dean sneered proudly. Su Zimo, how long do you think your black tortoise phenomenon can last against my double phenomenon? In truth, the instant the world-cleansing green lotus appeared, the phantom of the sacred beast, the black tortoise, shuddered momentarily. The limbs of the black tortoise struggled to advance, and its body sank considerably. Dean flicked his palm forward gently, and the green lotus in it floated into the chaos ocean. It flowed along with the tides and gradually fused as one with the ocean. Past. This is. Above the clouds, many nascent souls gasped and their pupils constricted. Dean raised his chin and said slowly, "Today, I'll let you have a clear understanding of your death. Not only do I possess a double phenomenon, I've even fused these two great phenomenons of the immortal and Buddhist Taoist together. This is an unprecedented golden core phenomenon that I shall name Chaos Green Lotus." When Chaos Green Lotus was formed, the initially noisy crowd went silent once more. Invincible, monster incarnate, unstoppable, those were the only words in the minds of the cultivators. Any word paled in comparison to the sight of the Chaos Green Lotus. It was at that moment when many cultivators truly understood why perfected Lord Hun E claimed that Di Yin could stand shoulder to shoulder with and even surpass the human emperor. If Di Yin could be compared to the human emperor because he cultivated a double phenomenon of chaos ocean and world-cleansing green lotus, he would have surpassed the human emperor completely by fusing them together as one to create a brand new golden core phenomenon. The power of that phenomenon was completely above chaos ocean. Notwithstanding the golden cores present, even the 17 nascent souls above the clouds felt chills run down their spine and were immensely threatened. This meant that the phenomenon could completely kill them. There was no longer anxiousness in the eyes of little Fatty and the others. Instead, it was replaced by despair. If anyone else was up against an opponent as such, they would only be able to experience deep despair. This man is truly way too strong. At that moment, Ji Chengtian could not do anything but lament helplessly. This was Di Yin's true trump card. Di Yin stood in the air above chaos ocean with a torrential aura. His figure was like an emperor that looked down on the world. Nobody could reach him, and everyone could merely look up at him. This was the number one perfected being. This was the number one of the golden core phenomenon ranking. Su Zimo, what do you have to fight me with? Who are you to try and kill me? Di Yin let out a deafening roar that resembled thunder. Along with Di Yin's voice, the green lotus that floated in the center of the ocean began to swivel. Petals opened up one after another as it blossomed and let out streams of resplendent lights. Every single lotus was etched with mysterious patterns that seemed as though they possessed the absolute truth of the universe. The green lotus blossomed and let out a world-cleansing glow. The black tortoise's phantom shuddered, and its glow dimmed as though it could disperse at any moment. "Mister, hurry and run." Little Fox could not help but yell. "There's no use, he can't escape." Lin Xuanji shook his head with a grim expression. Right now, as long as Su Zimo makes a rash move, his spirit energy will definitely be loosened. The moment he reveals an opening, he will be killed by the Chaos Green Lotus. On the battlefield, although the black tortoise phenomenon seemed as though it could disperse at any moment, Su Zimo's heart was calmer than anything else and his mind was completely clear. Right in front of everyone, Su Zimo assumed a lotus position on the shell of the black tortoise. He lowered his head and placed both palms on his knees facing upright. Has he given up on fighting? What can he do even if he doesn't give up? Who can defend against the Chaos Green Lotus? He can die without regrets being killed by the Chaos Green Lotus. In midair, Di Yin pointed to Su Zimo with a cold gaze. Die. The green lotus that floated in the ocean shook. Swoosh! A raging tide surged on the ocean's surface, accompanied by a soft explosion, and surged forward. Instantly, it drowned the black tortoise along with Suzimo entirely. Ah! The crowd gasped. It was over. The black tortoise phenomenon could not defend against the power of the chaos green lotus and was engulfed instantly. Even Suzimo sank to the bottom of the ocean and vanished without a trace. Little Fatty and the others stood rooted to the spot with widened eyes, unable to register what had just happened in their minds. Ha 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 ha. Perfected Lord Honey reared his head in wild laughter. Good, good. Qian killed him, so all his treasures now belong to Chaos Essence Sect. Roar! Demonic chi shrouded around Monkey as he reared his head and let out a deep roar. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Perfected Lord Honey above the clouds, venting the endless fury and killing intent in his heart. Brother? Xiaoning's face was frightfully pale as she said with a trembling voice. Su Hong had already passed away. If Su Zimo died as well, it would be an unimaginable blow to Xiaoning. Don't worry, he isn't dead yet. Suddenly, Night Spirit's voice sounded. He was glaring at the depths of Chaos Ocean with a cool gaze, as though he had seen something. Lin Xuanji exclaimed softly as well. Although he could not see what was happening within Chaos Ocean, Yin's expression did not relax after Su Zimo was engulfed by Chaos Ocean. Instead, he was looking grimmer. What happened? Could it be? Chapter 749, Third Phenomenon. Chapter 749, Third Phenomenon. In midair, Chaos Ocean churned still and stirred massive waves without any signs of letting up. However, Yin's eyes no longer had a mocking look in them. He narrowed his gaze and glared at the depths of the ocean, as though he had spotted something. All of a sudden, in the depths of that dark ocean, streaks of red light could be faintly seen. They grew brighter and clearer as they tore through layers of chaos and the ocean's surface. A brilliant glow was released that illuminated the entire ocean surface scarlet. Flames. Flames had appeared at the bottom of Chaos Ocean. Immediately after, a massive figure floated up from the depths of the ocean with a puffed chest and a bright gaze. It was the sacred beast, the black tortoise, that was devoured by Chaos Ocean earlier on. The black tortoise phenomenon did not get dispersed by Chaos Ocean. Where is Su Zimo? No idea, but that black tortoise phenomenon seems different from earlier on. Su Zimo's figure had vanished entirely. Instead, raring flames blazed on the shell of the black tortoise, massive and fiery. The flames were so immense that even Chaos Ocean could not extinguish them. All of a sudden, a bedazzling glow that intensified flashed from the right side of the skies. In that dark night, a blazing sun appeared and released a scorching heat. It illuminated the entire myriad phenomenon city like daylight. The skies on the left were still ink black and silently cold. It was as though the skies had been split into two entirely different worlds. Day and night appeared at the same time. It was dark on the left side and bright on the right. Between the two worlds where darkness and light intersected, lightning flashed and thunder howled, releasing endless electric arcs that spread through the voids like spirit snakes. The appearance of day and night together released two distinct lusters of yin and yang that coincidentally converged on the shell of the black tortoise. Yin and yang were interweaving. The mysterious patterns on the black tortoise's shell seemed as though they were triggered and released streams of resplendent lights. Swoosh! A blaze surged. All the cultivators present, including the 17 nascent souls above the clouds, were watching the battlefield fixedly with bated breath. Extinguish! Qian channeled his spirit energy and the green lotus swayed. Chaos Ocean howled as waves rose one after another to crash against the black tortoise. However, the black tortoise was unyielding and the flames did not extinguish. Perfected Lord Honey frowned and asked deeply, "What are those flames? How are they not extinguished by Chaos Ocean?" Monk Yuan Kong mulled with a bright gaze. The flames seem as though they possess the aura of the Tao of Buddhism. Before his words were finished, Sanskrit sounded in midair. Someone was chanting sutras and prostrating to Buddha in that intense battle with a voice that resounded like a bell. It was loud and reverberated through one's ears. Every single word possessed a mysterious, noble power. The voids trembled. That's Mister's voice. Little Fox broke out in tears with joy. She had been by Su Zimo's side for 20 years at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, coiled up in his ankles. She would often fall into slumber listening to Su Zimo's voice as he recited sutras. Little Fox could not be more familiar with those Sanskrit words. Su Zimo isn't dead. It seems like things are going to change once more. Cries of surprises came from the crowd. But where is he? More than shock, the eyes of the 100,000 cultivators were filled with questions. Above the battlefield, the green lotus swayed and chaos ocean churned. The black tortoise stood steady in the ocean with its limbs as a flaming light burst into the air on its shell, but there was no trace of Su Zimo. The Sanskrit became louder as time passed. Right in front of everyone's eyes, a jade-like pristine green lotus grew from the blazing flames. It was flawless and shone with a pure glow. It's the world-cleansing green lotus again. Su Zimo has also comprehended the world-cleansing green lotus. Even without the reminder of the 17 nascent souls above the clouds, the 100,000 golden cores present recognized that phenomenon right away. Just then, the Sanskrit stopped. A calm voice sounded from the shell of the black tortoise. Dean, sorry to disappoint you. I don't possess a double phenomenon. Many cultivators were agape. As they looked at the green lotus on the black tortoise's shell, everyone came to a realization. With that world-cleansing green lotus, Su Zimo had already cultivated 3 golden core phenomenons. No matter who it was, Dean or Su Zimo, that won the fight today. Both of them had accomplished unprecedented attainments. Although Dean's expression was grim, he sneered still. So what if you have 3 phenomenons? All 3 of them are trash. There's now how you can compete against my Chaos Green Lotus. Foo-foo. Su Zimo smiled lightly, not rebutting his words. His 3 phenomenons represented the Daos of immortal, Buddhism, and fiends. Furthermore, all of them were the top golden core phenomenons of their respective Daos. In reality, back when Su Zimo left the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, he had already cultivated the world-cleansing green lotus. Dean was able to realize that phenomenon after browsing through the mystic Dharmic Lotus Sutra for a month. How could Su Zimo possibly gain nothing after spending 20 years laying dormant? Initially, the divine turtle and soaring serpent phenomenons were irreconcilable with their fire and water natures and were in constant conflict. The reason why the 2 phenomenons were able to fuse to become the black tortoise phenomenon later on was because Su Zimo had cultivated Buddhism at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley and accomplished the world-cleansing green lotus. However, Su Zimo was unable to fuse the 3 phenomenons together. It was only after he ascended the myriad phenomenon peak that he obtained a true resolution. Su Zimo experienced the marks and auras of many ancient phenomenons on the myriad phenomenon peak. Those phenomenons were a representation of the ancient era, the most glorious civilization period of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend Daos. Although Su Zimo could not comprehend the thousands of ancient phenomenons, he could appreciate the intent of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend Daos behind them. The turtle and snake intertwined, fire and water fused while passive and activeness were harmonized. Day appeared with night, light stacked upon darkness, and yin and yang intersected. When the multiple sources of power were used on the back of the black tortoise, the obscure and mysterious runes on its back were activated and the true power of the black tortoise was released. The existence of that power was the reason why the black tortoise was not drowned by Chaos Ocean. The flames on the back of its shell were left behind by the Siraka flower. That was a divine flame of the Buddhist Tao. Chaos Ocean was not able to extinguish it. The Siraka flower possessed the power of life. With the help of the Siraka flower, Su Zimo fused the world-cleansing green lotus into the black tortoise phenomenon perfectly, and an eternal green lotus blossomed from the blazing flames. In fact, The green color of the lotus was purged away by the raging flames, and dazzling streaks of golden light were gradually released. Within the terrifying flame ocean, an indestructible golden lotus was born and shone brilliantly. One after another, golden petals blossomed and gradually revealed a golden lotus seat within. A figure sat on the lotus seat with his palms clasped together. His head was lowered in a dignified manner, and he was shrouded by an endless golden glow, resembling a Buddha that sat on the lotus seat with absolute authority. Everyone focused their attention. It was Su Zimo who had vanished earlier on. Within Chaos Ocean, the black tortoise broke out. Day and night appeared together, and lightning flashed as thunder crackled. The sea of flames was massive and shone with a golden glow as the entire world shook. Chapter 750. Attack of a Perfected Lord. Chapter 750. Attack of a Perfected Lord. The black tortoise disregarded the raging tides and moved against the current with the golden lotus on its back. Day and night appeared together while lightning flashed as thunder crackled. The two heads of the turtle and serpent reared and roared into the skies, sweeping their divine might through the 9 heavens in a majestic manner. An intense clash broke out between the two great golden core phenomenons in midair. Bang, bang, bang. Incomparably strong air currents darted wildly, causing the voids to quake, and scorching heat waves were released one after another from the center of the two great phenomenons. Pest! What a tremendous power! The nascent souls above the clouds were shocked. All of them felt threatened by the power released from the clash of the two great golden core phenomenons. Without hesitation, everyone retreated far away from the battlefield, afraid that they would be implicated. Perfected Lord Honey, Monk Yuan Kong, Perfected Lord Tianming, and the others were alarmed and furious. Their gazes were grim as they looked at one another. All of them could see the killing intent in the other's eyes. This lad must not survive. The power released by that golden core phenomenon was enough to kill them. Even if they were in Di Yin's position, they couldn't guarantee that they could defend against the golden core phenomenon and escape unscathed. That phenomenon combined the secrets of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend Taoist, and had even tapped into the power of heaven and earth. It was comparable to Dharmic power. It will never happen. Di Yin's blood qi surged, and he channeled his golden core wildly such that even his expression turned menacing. He was the top of the previous phenomenon ranking. He was the #1 perfected being. His attainments in his golden core phenomenon had already surpassed the human emperor. He was definitely going to leave his name in history and dominate over Tianhuang mainland. He must not lose here. A defeat would erase all his past glory instantly. His glory would be the stepping stone of this green-robed cultivator before him. The green lotus swayed and released streams of pure, flawless light, causing raging tides to surge forward one after another in Chaos Ocean. Boom! It was yet another deafening sound. Immediately after, a massive object tore through the waves and arrived at the front with the might of heaven and earth, slamming violently towards Di Yin. Swash! The chaos green lotus shone and stood in the black tortoise's path. Bang! The chaos green lotus collided against the black tortoise. The world changed. It was as though everything was frozen at that moment. Everything went silent. Although the green lotus remained intact, its glow dimmed completely without any greenness in it, as though it had withered. A series of cracks appeared on the black tortoise's body as it stopped for a moment before dispersing. On the surface, it seemed as though Di Yin had the advantage. However, his expression was extremely grim at the moment. That was because Su Zimo's golden core phenomenon was not completely destroyed yet. Although the black tortoise was gone, the golden lotus that was born in the blazing flames was still present. Break it! Su Zimo descended like a divine being and roared. He strode forward with the golden lotus in his hands and smashed it on the chaos green lotus before him. Boom! The two lotuses collided and bright Buddha lights filled the surroundings. The true form of the golden lotus was a world-cleansing green lotus. However, yin and yang intersected while lightning and thunder fused. soaked in seawater and refined under raging flames. It evolved into an everlasting golden lotus. Gold was indestructible and eternal. It could last as long as heaven and earth and shared the brilliance of day and night. Crack, crack, crack. The chaos green lotus cracked. Dean jerked and his eyes grew dim as blood drained from his face. The chaos green lotus was fused from two great phenomenons and was even able to threaten nascent souls. It was obvious how immense the burden of that toll on Dean's body was. Now that the chaos green lotus was shattered, the rebound of the power caused Dean severe injuries instantly. Dean fell over, coughing huge mouthfuls of blood. Ah! A series of exclamations broke out from the crowd. Dean was defeated. Nobody expected that outcome from this earth-shaking battle. This was a battle that was filled with ups and downs. Both monster incarnates released countless methods, spirit arts, and secret skills that were far beyond the realm of knowledge for Golden Cores. The Golden Core phenomenons released by the two of them at the end were so strong that even nascent souls had to keep their distance. Ba. Monk In Lu lamented, in the ancient era, there was the legend of the dragon horse accomplishing the river diagram. To think that we're actually witnessing the sight of a black tortoise destroying chaos today. The younger generation will definitely surpass us. None of the other nascent souls spoke. Some of them had not gotten over the clash between the two great Golden Core phenomenons earlier on. Some of them were emotional while others shook their heads and sighed lightly. Some of them had bright gazes that flickered with uncontrollable killing intent. Perfected Lord Hun Yi and the others had grim expressions as they exchanged glances. That lad's spirit energy must have been used up after he released such a terrifying phenomenon and fought in such an intense battle. His Golden Core phenomenon is about to disperse soon. Everyone, the best chance to kill this lad is now. We can't wait any longer. That's right. Given his potential, things will only turn worse after he grows further. After killing him, I want the Purple Thunder Manual in his possession. That belongs to Zephyr Thunder Palace. I won't take any of the other treasures. I want the Divine Phoenix Bone. That's enough. We can discuss how to split the loot after killing him. Now isn't the time to be arguing about that. Their spirit consciousnesses shuttled as Perfected Lord Hun Yi and the others conversed in secret. Right then, Dean was falling after his Chaos Green Lotus was shattered. Su Zimo wielded the Golden Lotus and continued his pursuit with a murderous intent. Perfected Lord Honey had a vicious gaze and suddenly struck. He could not wait any longer. Dean must not die. Even if he lost this battle, he was still an incomparable monster incarnate and the most talented cultivator of Chaos Essence sect. As long as Su Zimo was killed, Dean would remain as the #1 perfected being. Perfected Lord Hun Yi's glabella shone, and his robes fluttered. Dermic power surged as a gigantic long sword was conjured in midair. It was extremely sharp and had a chilling intent. In the blink of an eye, the gigantic sword appeared above Su Zimo's head and thrust down viciously. The place fell into an uproar. That attack happened way too suddenly. Nobody expected a nascent soul to interfere in the battle. Furthermore, his attack came without any warning. It was more like an ambush. How dare you? Perfected Lord Yujun's expression changed starkly as he roared and struck instantly. However, his reaction was already a step slower. It's over, Lin Xuanji exclaimed internally when he saw that. Even bystanders could not react to it. How could Su Zimo, who was wholeheartedly focused on Dean in the battlefield, avoid that killing move? Furthermore, it was clear that Su Zimo's spirit energy was depleted, and he was at his limits after his fight with Dean. A golden core was almost definitely doomed in an ambush by a nascent soul. Many cultivators could have already envisioned the image of Su Zimo's corpse. Right in front of countless gazes, Su Zimo, who was about to catch up to Dean, suddenly froze in his tracks as though he was possessed. In a flash, he twisted and propped the golden lotus in his hands above his head. Clang! The moment the golden lotus was lifted above his head, the gigantic sword descended and struck the golden lotus, causing sparks to fly along with the jarring sound of metal clashing. Chapter 751. Uncontrollable Situation. Chapter 751. Uncontrollable Situation. What swift reactions! The crowd gasped. Even Perfected Lord Yujun was a step slower in stopping Perfected Lord Han Yi's ambush. To think that Su Zimo could stop in time and shield his head with the golden lotus. That was the benefit of cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Even without seeing or hearing it, he could still detect danger. However, detecting danger was one thing. Whether or not he could defend against the power of a nascent soul was another. A blinding light burst forth when the gigantic sword collided against the golden lotus, sending resplendent streaks of light everywhere. A heat wave burst forth and almost flipped all the golden cores in the vicinity over. The gigantic sword was repelled high into the air. The golden lotus exploded right away. Finally, that earth-shaking golden core phenomenon was shattered into pieces after being ground down by chaos ocean relentlessly coupled with the attack of a nascent soul. There was a boom. Su Zimo crashed down onto the ruins of the collapsed stone platform and was buried beneath the stone slabs, vanishing from sight. Many cultivators shook their heads when they saw that. Su Zimo's spirit energy was probably used up completely after his intense battle with Dian. It was clear that the power of his phenomenon had also deteriorated. Coupled with his hurried defense, he would most likely be crippled even if he managed to survive that sword strike. What a pity! To think that the number 1 of this phenomenon ranking would meet with such an end. That's what happens when you don't have the backing of a strong sect or faction. Many cultivators lamented internally. Honey, what are you trying to do? Perfected Lord Yujun was enraged and bellowed as he swept his sleeves to send an attack forth. The gigantic sword conjured by Perfected Lord Han Yi's dermic power was shattered by Perfected Lord Yujun's sleeve sweep and dissipated instantly. Perfected Lord Yujun soared into the air and slapped his storage back. His spirit consciousness jolted and summoned 2 chilling flying swords that circled around him. The tip of the swords quivered like the forked tongues of snakes and were aimed directly at Perfected Lord Han Yi. At the same time, Perfected Lord Do Bei of Heavenly Dipper Sect, Perfected Lord Tianming of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Monk Yuan Kong of Hollow Monastery, Monk Wei Fu of Diamond Monastery, and some others rose one after another, glaring at Perfected Lord Yujun with hostile expressions. Lin Xuanji's heart skipped a beat when he saw that. The fight for the phenomenon ranking began to spin out of control the moment Perfected Lord Honey attacked. In fact, it might already be beyond Enigma Palace's control at this point. Why, you wish to kill me, Yujun? Perfected Lord Honey raised his brow slightly. You harbored designs and tried to murder a paragon of our human race. What does it matter even if I kill you? Perfected Lord Yujun was truly furious at this moment, given his character. Nothing so vile had ever happened since the inception of the Golden Core phenomenon ranking in the ancient era. A nascent soul had disregarded Enigma Palace completely by ambushing a Golden Core. His methods were simply way too despicable. Honey, don't you have any shame? Perfected Lord Luo Shui stood up as well with a cold expression that seemed as though her face was veiled by a layer of frost. Fu. Perfected Lord Han Yi swept his gaze at Perfected Lord Luo Shui before sneering, Yujun, this lad is a demon? What's wrong with me stepping in to kill a demon? You're trying to kill me because of a demon instead? Yujun, Enigma Palace was founded by Fairy Ling Long. You must not forget your roots and stand on the side of the demons, Monk Wei Fu said slowly as well. Bullshit. Perfected Lord Yujun replied coldly. Su Zimo had been to the human emperor's palace and ascended the myriad phenomenon peak to leave his name on the ancient phenomenon stele. He is recognized by both the legendary human emperor and Fairy Ling Long. That alone is proof of his identity. Yet, you guys insist on twisting the facts. Where are your morals? Perfected Lord Beidou said indifferently, Make way, Yujun. That lad will definitely have to die today, and not even Enigma Palace can protect him. What if Snowdrift Valley is included? Perfected Lord Luo Shui shifted to the side of Perfected Lord Yujun in a flash. The 2 nascent souls of the fiend sects smirked coldly. Although both of them looked down on the disgusting antics of the immortal cultivators, they chose to wait by the sidelines idly. In the blink of an eye, two factions were created on the battlefield. From the immortal sects, apart from Glass Palace that was not present, 7 nascent souls stood forth, leaving Perfected Lord Luo Shui as the only one on Perfected Lord Yujun's side. From the 6 Buddhist monasteries, Hollow Monastery and Diamond Monastery took the lead, and 5 of the monasteries stood on the side of Perfected Lord Hun Yi. Why are you guys doing this? Monk Yin Lu frowned as he looked at the 5 perfected lords of the Buddhist monasteries in disbelief. Monk Wei Fu said deeply, I don't care if he's a demon or a fiend. In any case, he isn't someone from our Buddhist monasteries. Since that's the case, he has to hand over the cultivation techniques and secret skills of the Buddhist monasteries, such as the mystic Dermic Lotus Sutra, and will have to cripple everything related to the Buddhist Tao in his body. That's right. The Tao of Buddhism must not be leaked to outsiders. The perfected Lord of Clear Heart Nunnery nodded as well. What are you talking about? Monk Yin Lu said, Buddhism places emphasis on the idea of karma. It's his karma that brought him the opportunity to cultivate the world-cleansing green lotus. You guys. When he saw the gazes of Monk Yuan Kong and the others, Monk Yin Lu was enlightened and suddenly stopped speaking. The people opposite him were not trying to kill Su Zimo for some righteous reasons. They were merely doing it out of greed. Monk Yin Lu sighed and rose before walking to Perfected Lord Yujun's side. Even so, Perfected Lord Yujun's group only consisted of the 3 of them. However, there were a total of 12 nascent souls on Perfected Lord Hun Yi's side. The difference in numbers was clear. In midair, the atmosphere between the 2 factions was extremely tense. The 100,000 or so golden cores on the ground were also gradually divided into factions. The majority of them, close to 70,000 people, chose to sit by the sidelines. Many cultivators from immortal sects were gathered, led by Chaos Essence Sect and Zephyr Thunder Palace. There were almost 30,000 of them, and they surrounded Little Fatty, Ji Chengtian, Xiaoning, Demoness Ji, and the others. Su Chang and Hang Qiuyu from the immortal sects, and Monk Jian Kong and Monk Zhu Chan of the Buddhist monasteries were among them as they glared at Little Fatty and the others greedily. As long as the order was pumped down from midair, a battle would break out on the ground instantly as well. Anyone that's unrelated should get as far away as possible. Su Cheng glared at Little Fatty, Ji Chengtian and the others before sneering, Don't think that we won't dare to lay our hands on you just because you're a cultivator from some of the unorthodox groups or heretical doctrines. Anyone on Su Zimo's side is my enemy, so don't blame me for not showing mercy. Right now, Dean was severely injured and was swallowing elixirs to heal up. Su Zimo had fallen into the ruins. Although his fate was unknown, he was most likely crippled. Rintu of Azura sect, who was ranked number 3 on the phenomenon ranking, did not intervene. As such, Su Cheng, who was ranked number 4, was definitely qualified to make such a statement. Spat. The spirit tiger rolled his eyes and scolded, Who do you think you are? Su Cheng gave a menacing laugh and pointed to Monkey and the other demons behind Little Fatty, saying with a murderous aura, None of you shall escape today. I'm going to peel your skin and crush your bones into ashes. Roar. Monkey, the spirit tiger and the others roared and reverted to their demon forms. Unknowingly, Night Spirit's figure had already vanished from the spot. Nobody knew how he left. Nobody could even spot any traces of him. Yujun, make way. Perfected Lord Hun raised his chin and said coolly with a sharp gaze, Su Zimo has to die today. That's the main point. Even Enigma Palace won't be able to stop us. Boom. Right then, a tremendous explosion could be heard from the ruins on the ground. Sand and gravel flew everywhere. In the billowing dust, a green figure could be seen rising faintly with dancing black hair. He gave off a terrifying aura and his eyes shone coldly with a torrential killing intent. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.